Hello, this is the second part of Kill the Boy by NeonZangetsu. Link will be in the description. All author's notes have been removed between chapters. Also, any explicit NSFW scene will be removed. This part will cover chapter 10 to 18. And so it was that I met our lord, the man of fire, warrior of the sun. He of the noddles, baron of broth, sovereign of soup. He who alighted upon my world in a pillar of fire. He looked upon me and said thus, Tilda Lorgar, leader of the Word-Bearers, also known as the Cult of Ramen. Kill the Heretic space travel proved an interesting experience, to say the least. Naruto had his reservations about it, naturally. He didn't much like the idea of being stuffed in a metal box to begin with, let alone leaving the planet. Travelling at interstellar speeds? Decidedly less so, because apparently said interstellar travel entailed passing through the warp. Even with a Geller field up, he could feel the focus of the three fixed firmly upon him, gnawing at the edges of his consciousness. Like a swarm of flies buzzing in his face, a ringing in his ears, an itch in the back of his mind he couldn't quite scratch. Honestly, it was enough to drive a man mad. Without Kurama and a host of other distractions, he probably would have gone insane long ago. He knew was taking a mighty risk here, travelling with the Emperor, or Big E, as he'd taken to calling him internally since he didn't know the man's name. Yet here he was, risking himself on, what some might say, a reckless venture, all for the sake of saving a single solitary soul. Someone he didn't even know, only that they needed help. Ha! Iruka would have been so proud. The thought drew a little smile to his lips as he went about his work. Angron hadn't been happy to see him go, but the up-and-coming paladin understood the necessity of it. If someone, somewhere, somehow was suffering as he had suffered, then it was his duty to aid them. Besides, this gave the boy a chance to better familiarize himself with his legion while he was away, the better to integrate himself with his own sons. Likewise, Isha had opted to remain behind, staying with the Emperor's son in her entirety, if only to better aid him in the trials to come. He missed her. He missed Angron. Heck, he missed them both. They'd shared a meal together, bid their heartfelt goodbyes, promised to see one another again soon. And off he went. In the end, he'd left a score of freshly empowered shadow clones behind with them and ordered at least 3 to keep themselves alive at all costs until his return. Still, the long trip to Kolkis gave him time to read up on the planet as well as figure out how to use a data slate. For the technologically inept such as he, they were a right and proper bitch to get through, and no one could tell him otherwise. He didn't deny their usefulness, but there was just something unnatural about them. Whatever happened to good old-fashioned pen and paper? Tossing one slate aside, he picked up another and continued reading the information that the Emperor's agents had gathered for him. Kolkis was a world governed by a theocracy called the Covenant, dedicated to the worship of a polytheistic religion they named the Old Faith, which, surprise, surprise, centered on the worship of the Chaos Gods. Varadesh, the capital city of the world, also known as the City of Grey Flowers, respected its holy leaders above all. The world itself was arid, partial sustainability, prevalent desert conditions extending to the edge of the habitable polar regions. Equatorial belt temperatures exceeded human tolerability at zenith of planetary cycle, and other fancier words he didn't quite understand, but got the gist of nevertheless. At 3 times the size of Terra, with a fraction of the population, it took almost 5 standard years to turn once around its merciless sun. And it turned with great patience. A local day apparently lasted a Terran week. A week lasted a Terran month. From orbit, its skin was a visage of unforgiving mountain ranges and auburn desert plains, veined by threading rivers. It was in dry lands like these that humanity's ancestors, the very first men and women on the world, no longer called Earth, rose in lands that would become known as the cradle of civilization. Even so, it had an extended day-night cycle to which humans struggled to adapt. As a result, Kolkisian civilizations developed a unique method for keeping track of time. Each local day was broken up into 7 sub-days of approximately 24 solar hours each, known as dawn-away, morn-day, long noon, post-noon, dusk eve, coldfall, and high night. These sub-days were further divided into 3 segments: wake rise, wake main, and rest eve nay, to correlate more closely with the stages of a Terran day. The hottest time of day on Kolkais was the wake main of long noon, and the coldest was rest eve of high night. Furthermore, mountains and deserts dominated the arid surface of Colchis, and human civilization clustered along its coastlines, relying on water and air transportation to travel between settlements. Strange, crumbling edifices dotted the planet's landscape, and no amount of exploration and research could fathom their purpose. On and on it went, over and over again. So much data! If he had to read one more slate on this pugnacious planet, his brain was going to explode. Oi, boss! Heads up. Exhaling in relief, he scrolled away last of his data slates and swayed backward, dodging a green fist as he went. Without looking up from his work, he swept a leg out, tripping his attacker, grabbed another one by the arm, smashed in the face of another with said data slate, and stomped on the head of a third, leaving the quartet a groaning mess at his feet. To call what he was doing multitasking would be insufficient. He had clones left behind on Nuceria, clones reading data slates he couldn't be bothered with, clones wandering around the Emperor's ship asking questions, and of course hidden shadow clones watching his back just in case someone tried to stab him in said back. Clones upon clones upon clones, all while he himself was brawling with the boys. This wasn't multitasking, this was multi-living. He could already feel the migraine coming from absorbing all their memories. His task completed, he set the slate aside and planted a fist on his hip, where he still kept Claw's severed head as a trophy. Even after several days, it hadn't dissolved, although its jaw had long since frozen itself shut in rigor mortis and ceased leaking spores. Did that mean he was still alive? Granted, the idea of a talking head both amused and terrified him, but for some reason, he couldn't quite bring himself to be rid of it just yet. Call him sentimental. Bemused, he turned his gaze upon the groaning greenskins sprawled across the metal decking. They had spirit, if nothing else, these orcs of his. What have we learned? All One Eye disentangled himself from the rest and rose to his feet to tower over him with a confused expression. Teamwork makes a dream work? Exactly. Naruto took the fist from his hip and pounded it into an open palm. Forget beating me. You'll never get the upper hand in a fight if you don't work together. He pitched his words to carry towards the rest of the orcs, each of whom were watching intently, waiting for their turn. I promised you all good fights, didn't I? A roar of assent passed through his minions. 150 orcs, plus one terribly embarrassed orc maid, had been confined to the cargo hold of the Emperor's vessel, out of sight of prying eyes. He understood the reasoning for that, even if he didn't wholly agree with it, given their excitability, but he wasn't about to leave them down here in the dark. Hence why he'd made it his mission to spar with them. Each and every one of them. All of them. He raised his voice to carry further, addressing his horde. You've all had a chance to fight me now, haven't you? A thunderous cry answered him. He spread his arms wide, riling them up further. Are you not entertained? More than 100 stomping feet were his reward. Orcs like to fight. He'd already known that, but moreover they liked to fight him. The lads were learning as they fought, and maybe that was a bad thing. But so long as he could aim them at his enemies, or better yet, teach them to be better, he wouldn't cast them aside. Now fight amongst yourselves, but without killing one another. He kept his voice sharp, maintaining his hard-won aura of commando. Last orc standing will become my general. More than a few of them looked between one another and began cracking their knuckles. Naruto stepped back, content to let them at one another. Almost immediately, Thresh was there with a warm towel to dry his forehead. He muttered his thanks and kept his eyes fixed forward as she went about her work. Zinch had clearly done something to the orc maid, if only because she wasn't acting a damn thing like her kin. Not around him, at least. Much to his surprise, the orcs had accepted her rather easily, as only orcs could. She's a maid, Den. Like dat one elder git with all the frills. Dem maids are proper strong, ain't they? Aye, she killed a lot of our boys. S'all right den, innit? Works for me. She didn't seem to bear him an ill will. None that he could sense at any rate, but he was wary around her all the same, no matter how amusing Isha might find her. The Emperor had suggested burning her alive on principle, and while he was hardly about to do that, that didn't make him any less cautious around her. He'd adopt a wait-and-see approach towards her for the time being, and if she proved treacherous, well, he'd burn that bridge when he came to it. Kurama sighed. Ready to break out the heavy flamer so easily? Seems the Imperium's rubbing off on you. He scowled. Can you blame me? Aisha and Angron alone had his trust, if only because they'd earned it. He'd see where these orcs went, be it into his good graces, or face first into the meat grinder. He wasn't blind to the byplay. He'd need a way to keep his new army in check, and already had a few ideas on that front, but for now, sparring, or crumping as they like to call it, with the lads was the best way to keep them in check. "Now you're thinking like an orc." Was it his imagination? Or had Claw's head chuckled just now? He glanced at it, but the bastard's jaw remained shut. "Oi!" One of the shorter orcs suddenly thrust a green fist in the air, startling him. "Where's wanna fight de maid first?" Thresh looked his way, cautiously curious. "Master." Naruto waved her on. "Have fun." Anything that got the boys out of his hair for a bit. Thresh needed no more encouragement than that. She stalked forward, already cracking her knuckles as she went. Different she might be, she still had all the strength of her kin, and by the excited gleam in her eyes, she was still very much an orc at heart. It did not end well for her brothers. Golden light emanated behind him, heralding a new arrival as he watched the beatdown. "You do realize fighting orcs only makes them stronger, no?" Naruto craned his neck back and up to beam at Angron's father. "Hey, Big E, was wondering when you'd come down here." He wasn't surprised when the Emperor sought him out. If anything, he was surprised it took so long. But the larger man had paused and was looking at him most strangely. "What did you just call me?" "Well," he shrugged, "I don't know your real name and I can't go around calling you Emperor all the time, so Big E it is. We still good on that alliance?" "We are," came the solemn reply. "It occurred to me that if I turned on you, you would not die easily." "No," he pivoted to glare up at him, "I wouldn't." He wasn't entirely certain he would win, mind you, but he wouldn't go quietly into that good night. He'd make the Emperor pay for it. Besides, any battle on their part would shatter Angron's loyalty and instantly turn Isha and the Aldari as a whole against the Imperium, which frankly had enemies aplenty already. Still, he couldn't help but pry. "And what brought you to that conclusion?" The Emperor sighed, a surprisingly human sound. "If I were to treat you as an enemy, I would be doing their work for them. Chaos wishes to see an end to both of us. I will not help those ruinous powers achieve their goal." Naruto tilted his head, vaguely recalling a well-worn phrase from his own world years before. "The enemy of my enemy is my friend. An ally at the very least," came the counter. "So long as you refrain from attacking me, I shall show you the same courtesy." Naruto released a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. That was good, very good. He was only 2 planets in with the Emperor as of yet, and he hadn't seen this terror of his yet, nor how he ran these so-called crusades of his. He'd give him the benefit of the doubt, for now. They'd be having words about those servitors of his later, though. He had questions about them. And this mechanicum he'd mentioned. A sudden cry from the orcs captured his attention, and he looked back to find Thresh standing amongst a pile of exhausted lads. Though her clothes were tattered and bosom heaving with heavy breaths, she nevertheless held her first high red eyes blazing with triumph. As he looked on, the orc maid threw her head back and hollered her triumph before pivoting to flash him a winning grin. Kurama snorted. "Feisty little thing." Tzeentch tittered in his head. "You're welcome, Tilda. Cheeky little troll." Heedless of the byplay, the Emperor snorted in mild amusement. Or derision. He could never be sure. "It would seem you have yourself a general. Do try not to breed with this one." Naruto clicked his tongue. "Hey now, I did not come here to provoke you, in any case." The Emperor held out a hand, revealing a slim metal discus and a holographic map etched within. "I've identified the whereabouts of my son. I thought it might behoove you to know his exact location on the planet. My spies suggest he is currently placed amongst the nomads' caravans wandering the wastelands of Kolkis. It is there that we shall find him, as though he couldn't already sense the boy below, a burning beacon of hope in his mind's eye." Naruto fixed him with a stern look regardless. "What did you say his name was again?" "Lorgar." Naruto blew out a sigh. "Angron, Magnus, and Lorgar. Yep, that settled it. You're not one for normal names, are you?" "They are my sons." The Emperor said that as though it somehow explained everything. "I named each of them with great care." "Are you sure they're not your tools?" The Emperor went terribly still. Naruto lifted his chin. There it was, the gauntlet, flung down at his feet. He wouldn't stand idly by and let the Emperor badmouth his allies, no matter how unconventional they might be. He'd already shut that shit down when he'd spoken ill at Isha, and he wasn't about to tolerate it here. "Mock me, and I'll mock you right back." He hoped the warning was overt enough, else their alliance was going to prove a short one. Say, he said apropos of nothing, seeking to change the subject, how does that foresight of yours work? Big E glowered at him. And how, pray tell? Do you know of that? Angron mentioned it. Did he now? Much his amusement, the master of mankind took the bait, hook, line, and sinker. I'm also told you can read minds. His smile became a tad more strained. Angron told you that too, didn't he? Honestly, that boy was entirely too honest for his own good. Couldn't even fault him for it, really. It was simply his nature to be brave, brash, and bold. He'd made a fine paladin in the wars to come. Him and his legion alike. They could sow such good. Ah, but Big E was looking to him for an answer. May as well give it. To an extent. And no, before you ask, I can't read yours. He tapped a finger to his skull as he spoke, whiskered cheeks dimpling. It's more a matter of sensing intent. I can read someone's mind if I get up close and touch 'em, sure, but I had to learn that skill, and you can sense ill intent. Naruto frowned at the sudden interjection. This guy really wasn't used to waiting, was he? I wouldn't say sense so much as detect. The Emperor considered him anew. You seem to delight in surpassing my expectations. Something in his voice caused his hackles to rise. Is that a good thing? At times. The larger man laid an armored hand on his shoulder, but not always. So long as the ruinous powers remain, however, we have common cause. The words were an olive branch, insomuch as Big E could offer one. He smirked at him in return. Pretty sure they're going to be around for a while. The so-called master of mankind granted him a rare, genuine smile. Then I expect we shall remain allies for quite some time. We'll see. He had a fair idea of how things on Colchis would play out. An entrance would be necessary. Already he could sense the taint of the ruinous powers upon the planet below. Colchis wasn't consumed, but it was affected. He could feel it tingling at the edge of his senses, a faint hum that set his teeth on edge. He ground them together as a muscle jumped in his jaw. Now that he was within range of the planet, he could clearly sense something amiss. Chaos was here. Of course we are, Slaanesh crooned in his ear, the darkest of depravity. We're everywhere. And yet you left Mother behind. Most unwise. He snorted. Isha's tough. She'll be fine. Will she? I trust her. Unlike you. But I could be so much more if you just gave in. Kurama shooed her off with an annoyed hiss. Away, harlot! The Emperor was still speaking as he shook her voice away. Have you ever dropped from orbit before? Flooding his entire body with Kurama's chakra, the wayward warrior allowed himself to gleam gold and black once more. Sounds fun? You're coming with. I shall join you after you've located Lorgar. Much to his surprise, the Emperor demurred. There is a matter that requires my personal attention. The orcs didn't take that lying down naturally. The second Naruto looked back, Thresh and the other orcs started protesting. Master, no! One Eye was right behind her. Oi, oi, you ain't leaving us behind. Where's going with ya? Fine, fine. He raised a hand toward their complaints off. But you're using drop pods. Pretty sure orcs can't survive an orbital drop. Thresh perked up. Where's gonna fight then? Probably. They could always scour the pods, and the cargo hold, with fire later. Better safe than sorry. Couldn't risk spores spreading. The Emperor called out after him suddenly. Naruto. He paused in mid-step and craned his neck back to regard him one last time. If you detect any signs of chaos below, destroy it and any who worship it. Do not allow the rot to spread. Finally, something they agreed on. If this planet was as bad as he thought it would be, well, better safe than sorry, he supposed. He was hardly about to let Nurgle regain a foothold on the material plane after his corporeal form had been destroyed. He flared his chakra cloak further to shield himself from the vacuum of space and strode towards the nearest airlock. One more unto the breach. The void awaited. 0.0, 0.0. Long had Lorgar waited. Through the fire and the flames, the beatings and the pain, he had held fast to his faith, never once wavering in his devotion, believing in the arrival of a great golden god. It had been hard at times. For all his fiery words and sordid speeches, Father did not share his worship of the true faith. Indeed, he often had him harmed because of said belief, for the mere act of speaking against the so-called worship of the Four. But how could he not speak of him? To be silent was a far greater sin, was it not? Surely it was. His dreams had been intense as of late, visions coming one after the other until he had difficult discerning the waking world from that of his dreams. Today, Father was disciplining him for that yet once more. He'd accidentally shattered a jug of water yesterday, and as punishment had been bid to walk the desert barefoot for a week without food or water, wearing naught but the rags on his broad back. Painful, but Lorgar knew he could do it. He was hardier than most boys, bigger and stronger too. He could endure, no, he would endure, even if it hurt. Father always seemed eager to punish him for even the slightest infraction. He didn't understand why. Corferon was a mysterious man at the best of times, but he did raise and care for him, sometimes. Sometimes Lorgar caught himself wanting to hurt his foster father, wrap his hands around his neck and squeeze. It would be easy too. Downright effortless even. None in the camp could stop him. The surety of it frightened him, how easily he could fall to violence. Shuddering but a little, he pushed his darker emotions away, and so he trudged ever onward, doing his best to ignore the searing sun beating down against his back. He was meant to be more than this. He knew it. He just knew it. But knowing was not the same as doing, and he was trapped here amongst these ignorant iconoclasts, many of whom would sooner silence his voice than allow him to speak the truth. How their ignorance saddened him so. He didn't want to hurt anyone, he just wanted to make them understand. A faint whistling noise caught his ear. Baffled, the boy glanced about, searching for its source. Lorgar looked left, Lorgar looked right. Lorgar found nary a soul in sight. Even the ground beneath him was dead and still, wholly devoid of any semblance of life. Then where? Above! A beam of light slammed down from the very heavens above and alighted before him in a pillar of fire, the impact of such blasted from his very feet. He recovered quickly. This was nothing compared to the lashes Father often gave him, and tumbled to his feet, ready to face whatever had come to claim his life. As the smoke cleared, he beheld something marvelous. Not some fallen shard of rock or metal from the stars, but a burning man wrapped in golden light, bearing strange black markings all over his body. His skin was pale and his eyes a vast glowing gold, pupils in the strange shape of a cross. An eerie black staff was clutched tight in his right hand, while a series of rippling black orbs hovered over his shoulders, shifting and stirring in the dry wind of Colchis. He had landed quite literally standing up. It must have been awful on his knees. And then he saw him. "Hello there, Tilda." His smile flashed forth. "Don't be afraid. We come in peace." Lorgar choked. He soon had the answers he sought, for strange metal boxes, pods, fell from the stars above to land behind the golden man, striking the dusty soil of Colchis one by one. Strange creatures of green emerged from those metal cages behind him. Some had painted themselves orange, others black, and still more, gold. Those pods falling from the stars, one after another. In no time at all, they numbered well over 100, more even. One pod, closer than the rest, disgorged a strange being bearing green skin, red eye, and long ashen hair. Unlike the other brutish green creatures, this one was most emphatically female, wearing an outfit almost solely composed of black and white frills. She stumbled free from her restraints and moved to stand beside the golden man at his right hand, as a servant would. Curious. Aside from a brief pang of curiosity, Lorgar paid the green woman and these aliens little mind. He only had eyes for the being before him, smaller than him perhaps, but still tall in a way most mortals weren't. His very presence radiated divinity, a peaceful serenity that he himself had sought all his life. To bask in his presence was holy. To stand before him nearly brought him low. Lorgar gazed upon a glowing god. Such was the only moniker he could think to give him, this great golden giant. Smaller than him, perhaps, but still tall in a way most mortals weren't. Despite their disparity in height, he was truly larger than life. "You must be Lorgar." He held out his most holy hand to him. "I'm Naruto. Pleased to meet you." The would-be Primarch recoiled, shocked. "You know my name?" "Of course I do." The blonde chuckled up at him with rueful amusement. He didn't get any further than that, and in hindsight, perhaps it was for the best, he didn't. Lorgar put 2 and 2 together in his head and got 5, naturally. This was him, the one from his dreams. He must be. He'd come to help him enlighten this world. At long last, he crashed down to a knee and bent his head. "Command me, Lord?" Silence stretched over the desert, nearly stifling in its disparity. His god sighed. "Damn it, Big E. Did you plan this?" A bemused rumble passed through the assembled army of greenskins. Lorgar ignored it, and in doing so, failed to see the god's confusion. By the time he raised his head, it had already passed, and his saviour had composed his glowing visage into something vaguely resembling composure once more. He looked tired. Bemused, but tired. Rise. He almost seemed to sigh the word, yet surely that was his imagination. Just stand up, you know. There's no need to kneel. There very much was, but he knew his god was being magnanimous, surely, and so rightfully remained on his knees. His golden saviour seemed to recognize it and clicked his tongue at him. Why are you all the way out there? Did he not know? Ah, surely this was but a test. He mustn't fail, and so bowed his head further. I was serving penance for my transgressions. That golden gaze narrowed. What transgressions? Shame coloured his face. I broke a water jug. And you were banished for it? Only for a week. This time, there could be no mistaking the strangled, outraged noise his deity made. A week? His head bowed deeper. It was better than taking 10 lashes from father, my lord. No father should raise a hand to their sons. Why did those words hurt so much? Corferon will be angry now that you've come. He was babbling now, he knew, but he couldn't help himself. He was just so excited. He preaches of the 4, not the 1. Many will not listen to you. The golden god laid a hand on his bald head and shushed him. In an instant, Lorgar felt a calm presence settle over him, perusing his thoughts as one might a tome. He allowed it. His mind was an open book. He had nothing to hide, indeed. He was humbled by his thauch. Ah, sweet certainty. Perhaps once upon a time this Naruto had been mortal. Now, he'd become so much more. Through blood, sweat and tears he had toiled until the moment of his ascension. Here was one who had earned their divinity. But why was his smile so sharp now? Take me to this Corferon. 0.0. When was the last time he'd been this angry? This furious? Livid? Naruto exhaled heavily, seized that anger, locked it up in a box, and buried it deep within his heart. Simply put, he'd seen it all. Lorgar's painful past wasn't just pushing his buttons, it was pushing all them, simultaneously. The torment and abuse he'd suffered, the beatings, everything. And yet, for all that, he wasn't on the verge of going berserk. He'd gone past that. Past hot, past cold, right into numbness, the likes of which he'd not experienced in an age. Because, you see, Lorgar was what he could have been. Alone, beaten and abused, forsaken by everyone and everything. This mustn't register on an emotional level. He couldn't afford to let it, if only because he could feel Khorne lurking, ready to pounce if he gave in to his rage. Already he could feel his orcs responded to his anger, ready to lash out the moment he did. So he didn't. He took his anger, channeled it inward, closed his heart, and focused. When his eyes opened, he knew what he had to do. What should have been done a long time ago. What he would do. What he must. 0.0. The whelp had returned 6 days ahead of schedule. Unacceptable. Completely, utterly unacceptable. Clearly he'd been too lenient. Corferon saw his approach long before he entered the encampment. It was impossible to miss Lorgar, not just by his bald head, but the boy's sheer size. Even at such a young age, he loomed head and shoulders above many. He could have been so much taller, but he walked with slouched shoulders and wrung his hands, unable to quite stand up for himself. But he had, hadn't he? He'd deliberately defied him, disobeyed his edict. That wouldn't do. He needed the boy weak and servile for his plans. Time to remind his pawn of its place. Oddly enough, he wasn't alone. There was a man with him, a strange, glowing fellow that radiated an ominous aura. And what was that great green glob looming in the distance? A trick of the heat, perhaps? His mind must be playing tricks on him. Regardless, he paid either little heed. He met his son at the outskirts, whip in hand, bridling with indignation. All the while, he was aware of the eyes upon him. He would show them, oh yes, show them all. A demonstration was needed, a scene to show, remind the encampment that he and he alone ruled the wastes. Fool of a boy! He snapped the lash just short of the boy's feet, simultaneously whipping himself into a towering fury, the better to intimidate this boy who could so easily break him. Not that he ever would, of course. He'd long since been broken by fear. Why have you returned? He spat at him, spittle flying from parched lips. I told you not to approach me until you served your penance. I'll have you whipped for this. Whipped, I say. On your knees. The boy shied away from him. Father, please. On your knees. A hand clamped down on his shoulder from behind. "Would you care to repeat those words, you soulless son of a bitch, Tilda?" When had the blonde one gotten behind him? Said hand spun him right round. Corferon never saw the blow that struck him. One moment the blonde man was staring at him, scowling, and in the next, the dark cardinal found himself flat on the ground, a hand wrapped around his throat. He gagged in surprise, clawing at the fingers slowly crushing the life from him. The blonde berserker dangled him a meter off the ground, leaving his feet flailing feebly in the air. Held him there now, his face reflecting nothing but utter disgust. And so he spoke, that golden god. "You reek of chaos." Corferon froze. "I know not what you mean." "Yes, you do." That scowl became a smile. "Just as I know all the pain you inflicted upon that poor boy, I made sure to remember it all." The cardinal gulped mere moments before he found himself flung to the ground, leaving him on his back. A boot stomped on his chest, pinning him there. "Listen well, Corferon." His tormentor crouched down before him, hissing softly in his ear. "Soon you're going to start looking for the right words." A hand closed around his head, stroking the underside of his chin with intent. "And until you say them aloud, I'm going to continue torturing you." "Torture?" "I'll make you experience the pain you inflicted upon Lorgar." The blonde continued with blasé disregard. "So start reaching into that brain of yours. Find the magic words to make me stop. Convince me to forgive you for everything you've done. Forgive you for existing at all." Indignation bridled within him, high and mighty. "You dare touch—" A bloody trench opened in his chest, rendering his words a shriek of pain. Naruto stared down at him, golden eyes blank. "Have you discovered the words yet?" "I am blessed." "You cannot kill—" Something flashed across his face, obliterating his right eye. "Perhaps the proper words have come to you now." He tried to speak but found none. Naruto took his left fingers, prompting another shrill scream. More would soon follow as he turned his attention elsewhere. Wrong. To his arm now. Wrong. Followed by his leg. Wrong. All the while he kept screaming, as Lorgar looked on silence. "Wait!" Corferon flung up the stump of an arm and finally managed to rasp out a word, trying to beg. "You don't understand what you're doing. The great powers can give you so much, make you more than what you are now. You have but to let them in." Those awful eyes flashed like Korn's balefire itself, black and cold as the darkest pit. "I'm well aware," Kor whimpered. "Then you don't want to do this. Kill me and they'll be furious with you. Spare me, and I can give you everything you've ever wanted." His would-be killer tilted his head. "Can you now?" "No." "Yes!" A moment of silence followed. His assailant took a deep breath. The cardinal dared to hope, then die. Naruto stabbed down with his staff. Corferon died as he lived, screaming. Chapter 11. It was from him that I learned what a true father should be, for fathers do not delight in harming their children. Fathers shelter them. Fathers teach them. Fathers raise them up. Sons or daughters, it matters not. A father protects. Tilda Lorgar, leader of the Word-Bearers, also known as the Cult of Ramen. Kill the coward. An army of orcs advanced upon the city of Varadesh. They said not a word, made not a sound save for their stomping feet. Naruto led them from the front, staff in hand, whiskered face carved from iron. Thresh walked at his left, and Ol one eye at his right, silent and brooding, as was he. Chaos could not be allowed a foothold on this planet any more than it already had, he told himself. He was doing this for the greater good, he told himself. Aisha would understand, he told himself. Pitiful excuses all, masks to cover his true intentions. He knew why he was doing this. What had brought him to this? Why he was about to tear this sordid city asunder. Corferon hurt Lorgar. Corferon worshipped the Chaos Gods. Corferon had friends and followers who would do the same. And so, they had to pay. Not in money or honor, but an older currency. Blood. The choice was obvious. Painful perhaps in hindsight, but obvious. He inhaled deeply, exhaled softly. And then, the orcs were ready. They awaited his command, all too eager to rip and tear. Naruto gave it gladly, pointing his staff at the city in the distance. Take the city. 0.0, 0.0, the silence was truly wonderful. Sweet, sweet vindication. Catharsis. Lorgar revelled in it, not just the death of Corferon, but the pilgrimage that followed, if one could call it such. The wind was howling, heralding a storm. Already the gale had begun to kicking up great clouds of dust, lashing at their clothes, stinging their eyes. He felt positively righteous, because, despite it all, Naruto led his legion forward without so much as a whisper. There was no rush, only a brisk march across the wastes to Varadesh. He knew he should be standing there at the front beside him, ready to fight with the rest. But he was afraid. He had not been taught the art of battle. In truth, he didn't very much like the idea of it at all. But in the same vein, he was beginning to understand. He had not been in the wrong, but rather been wronged. After living through Kor Phaeron's abuse for so many cycles, the smallest bit of kindness was more than humbling. It was overwhelming. He didn't deserve this. He was an unworthy wretch, unworthy to stand with them, unworthy to even be here, Lorga. The soon-to-be Primarch perked up to find Naruto peering over his shoulder at him. My lord? He expected anger, a rebuke at the very least. Only fight if you feel the need to, you hear me? Instead, he received a smile through the sandy haze. Otherwise, stay behind us at all times. We'll keep you safe. He nodded fretfully. Already he could see the enemy encampments ahead. They were impossible to miss at this distance, even with the dust storm raging. Doubtless the city had seen them coming from afar. Given ample time to prepare, they'd rallied a makeshift army of their own to face them in the field. Even from here he could see there were more of the cultists than them, likely 1,000 at least. They were outnumbered, outgunned, outmaneuvered, and yet the Golden God and this Orc Legion never faltered. All One Eye rumbled a laugh, low and lisping against his tusks as he hefted a mighty battle-axe. Now this is going to be a proper crump. Thresh elbowed him. Don't say dat. Haven't even started yet. Lorgar hid a rueful smile behind one hand. Thresh was nice, he supposed, or she tried to be. At father's orders, she had seen him cleaned and properly fed, festooned in robes of amber and gold, a far cry from the threadbare rags of before. She'd even gone so far as to tear up one of the tents and drape the green mantle around his shoulders, something about him being an honorary orc now that father had taken him under his wing. Coupled with the massive mace someone was kind enough to shove into his hands, he was a far cry from the poor pauper he'd appeared only a cycle before. It will be a white, she had said, fumbling only a little over the last word. Master is here now. Everything's gonna be a right. Lorgar believed her, even if he didn't necessarily believe in himself just yet. But he did believe in his god and father. There was no sense of strategy for the Orcish army as they approached the city. The enemy cultists had made no attempt to speak with them or parley as of yet. Indeed, they seemed determined to face them and die here outside the walls. As such, the orcs' fervour grew with each step, and soon enough they would lose all semblance of control and wade into the fray. One of them saw the gun emplacements and cackled. Dibs on the ducker, Naruto scoffed, waving a golden hand in acquiescence. If you can take it, you're welcome to it. That sent a stir through the lads, and more than a few began shouting. Wait, where's can have all the loot? I have no need for it, but try not to die getting to it in the first place. The words sounded dismissive, but Lorgar could hear the genuine concern ringing therein. I can grow back limbs, repair eyes, fix organs and broken bones, but I can't reattach your head. He slapped the large orc head dangling from his hip for good measure. A relic, perhaps? There was a certain energy about it, to be sure. Haven't attempted to reattach any heads yet, so please don't make me try. Some of the orcs laughed at that. So you can fix us up so Iz can fight again, is that it? Not quite. I just don't want to steal all your kills. Thresh tilted her head and Lorgar mirrored her, quietly confused. Rather than retort, father placed his hands together, crossed his fingers and muttered something under his breath. Quite suddenly there were more of him. A lot more. A great many more. One by one they arose from great plumes of smoke, armed and ready. Many an orc grunted in surprise, quite unprepared for the newcomers in their ranks. It was then that Lorgar truly understood what he was looking at. Naruto didn't need an army, did he? He was the army. He really was a god, wasn't he? One of the scouts squawked suddenly. Incoming Tilda. They needn't have said so. The enemy charge was impossible to miss. Startled by the sudden reinforcements, the forces of Varadesh rushed in to meet them. I've had enough of this planet. Naruto slung his ringed staff over one shoulder and boomed out a command. Give them no glory, no songs, only death. So, speaking, he stepped up to meet him, all One Eye on his left and Thresh on his right in her battered black and white frills. They were the vanguard, the ones the cultists met first, and butchered them in droves. It was a slaughter, the dead dropping in the dust. They waded in without a word, no shouts, no screams, just silent rage. Naruto caught one by throat and threw him over his shoulder. Thresh punched one in half. One Eye bit a man's head clean off and used his body as a club to flatten 5 more. That was all he had time to see before the rest of the orcs and Father's clones surged in to fill the gap. They took the fight to the unbelievers in droves. It was amazing, glorious, wonderful. No, those weren't the right words for this. Brutal, cunning, efficient. Naruto walked ahead of his allies as Thresh went left and One Eye right. It was as if the blonde's very body blurred, striking out at his enemies with impossible precision. His staff flitted out, sweeping the legs from one before obliterating him with a strange spiralling sphere of purest blue, then whirling with his staff, staving in a cultist's head like an rotten melon. Rotten. That sounded right. These fools were rotten. They would rather fight than speak. They rejected Father's presence, his most holy mercy, and sought to wage war upon him instead. They were the true non-believers, blasphemers, death to the heretics. Another cultist came on in wake of the first, only to be caught by the face and pulped as one might an overripe grape. 2 more he disemboweled with a flick of his fingers. A third was somehow able to duck said swipe, a nanosecond before the blazing blonde kicked him in the chest and sent him screaming into the distance. His body struck the walls and was rendered a grisly red smear therein. Naruto waded in after his fellows, fists swinging. He needed no armor, for his was contempt and silence. He didn't even acknowledge those he killed. Cor Ferron he had at least spoken to, not these. He caught one of the ignorant iconoclasts by the throat, hoisted him high, and snared another by the face before he could flank him. Much to Lorgar's horror, the former actually dared to open fire on him with a heavy pistol. With his enhanced senses, he was granted a serendipitous view of the bullet flattening against the blonde's glowing forehead before ricocheting away. Annoyed by such a paltry effort, Naruto turned to face the one who had shot him, narrowed his eyes, yanked the man in, and headbutted him into oblivion. Without so much as a passing glance, he pulped the other and kept walking, forcing Lorgar to follow or be left behind. And as he followed, he observed the moving massacre. Father punched down and a cultist was left flattened at his feet. Even as they fell, he casually backhanded another before they could leap upon his shoulders and stab him. An arm slashed backward, casually catching a cultist by the throat. He whipped them forwards, forcing their robed body to serve as a crude shield, a bullet sponge for the fusillade of bullets that came, rendering their body a mangled mess of twisted leather and sinew. They did not survive. A rocket whistled down from the battlements high above. Naruto caught it and threw it back, devastating the grenadier's position, a goodly portion of the wall besides. Unsatisfied with that, he spun his staff around a hail of dark orbs, swung forth, obliterating a nearby fortification and the gunners with it. On and on it went. Naught could stop him. Nothing could challenge him. None could stand against him. Each attack only made his eyes harder, his body better, feet faster, fists stronger. A low whir of a machine was their only warning. Naruto whipped around and Lorgar followed his gaze, eyes bulging. A tank? Those existed here? Where had they dug up that old relic from? 10 orcs were scythed down in an instant, then aimed their way. There was no time to think, only react. Stop watching! Do something! Lorgar spied a massive piece of broken scrap metal at his feet. Part of the barricades the orcs had destroyed were even now destroying. An idea dawned. A mad scheme. But were not the gods themselves mad? Seizing the metal plate in hand, he lunged forward and flung it up before his father, shielding him at the last moment. Bullets peppered against the steely edifice, spraying sparks, but unable to pierce through. The blonde granted him a grateful look, one replaced by confusion, as Lorgar shoved it into his hand and bounded into the fray. This was madness. He had neither armor nor combat experience, only a mace. But, whether he knew it or not, he was a Primarch. He surged forward. Another vehicle rushed out behind the first to barrel into him for all the good it did him. Lorgar ducked his head, trusted in his instincts, lowered his shoulder and barged onward. Much to his surprise, he crashed right through the vehicle to pulverize those within, meat and metal flashing by him in a blizzard of death. There was no time for surprise. He was through, the tank in sight, its baleful lights glowing in the gloom. Its long barrel swiveled, trying to track him. No use. A single leap carried him the rest of the way. He landed atop the carriage, causing the entire craft to collapse beneath the sheer weight of his bulk. The gunner saw him and balked, fumbled for his sidearm, and brought it up to empty the clip into him. Lorgar warded a hand before his face. And yet there was no pain. None at all, for the bullets didn't pierce his flesh. Rather, they could not. The Chaos cultists unloaded the entirety of their magazine in a matter of moments, and, while the front of his robes were left quite a mess, the flesh beneath remained untouched. Lorgar took a moment to stare down at himself, incredulous, gazing at his hands, hale and whole. Was he invincible too? The gunner balked at his weapon, wondering why it had failed, screamed an imprecation, and drew a blood-crusted sword. Something awoke within Lorgar, and he reacted accordingly. His mace sailed down with blistering speed to crush their arm. A howl of agony was his reward, but he scarcely had time to hear it, for his body was moving nigh, of its own accord, and his arm with it. His mace swept down on the gunner again. Once. Twice now. Thrice soon enough. Spattered in blood, eyes stinging, chest heaving, from adrenaline, he hopped off the ruined craft and took a moment to survey his surroundings. The battle was nearly done. In distracting one tank, he'd inadvertently allowed the army to wage war on the rest and claim victory. Thresh had already vaulted onto the sole remaining tank. As he looked on, she alighted nimbly atop its surface, slapped a device of some sort to its surface, and vaulted away. A plume of fire erupted in her wake, destroying the it and those within. Here at last, Father deigned to smile and beckoned her to him. Thresh leaned lower and let him pat her head. Lorgar found himself strangely jealous at the sight. Perhaps if he learned the arts of war spread his name across the stars, he too would be worthy of these head pats. A hand tapped his shoulder. He looked down and found Naruto offering him the battered metal plate, all but giving the crude shield to him. Good job. Lorgar accepted it, preening at the praise. But Father was already moving on, wading back into the thick of things. What choice did he have but to follow him? One did not take their eye off a god. In no time at all, they reached the gates. Here at last, Lorgar allowed himself a moment of doubt. Did he intend to beat the walls down with his bare hands? No, surely not. A massive sphere of blazing blue ignited in Father's palm, larger than he was tall. Father brought it crashing down, and the gate crumbled. Fresh gunfire peppered them from above, to which their blazing blonde made an annoyed noise and lunged upward, clearing the gatehouse in a single bound. He landed amongst the defenders. Fists flew. From this distance, Lorgar couldn't quite see the gunners' faces. Until he did, because suddenly said faces were landing at his feet, with the rest of them besides, broken and twisted from their long fall. Old One Eye lumbered up to him, chuckling under his breath. Should have been born an orc, that one. Lorgar bridled for a moment before mastering himself. This greenskin spoke heresy, but he recognized the sentiment behind it. Such was his savior, his father, his god. Here at last, Naruto roared his fury. A single sharp yell that seemed to swallow the very with it, the orcs found their voice with a cry of, "Wah!" High atop the battlements, Naruto thrust a fist into the air. A mighty golden beast manifested above him to mimic the motion. Together they spoke. "With me now," he roared. "Come with me and take this city." The orcs howled their fury and surged forward into the gap. Lorgar found himself running after them, mace in hand. A tide of green boiled into Varadesh. 0.0. Isha sensed the slaughter from New Syria. Felt in her soul. Naruto. 0.0. From his flagship, the Emperor observed the slaughter that followed. It seemed he had chosen well after all. He was pleased. 0.0. Zinch absolutely cackled atop his throne of secrets. Good. That's the way, Tilda. What a lovely day. 0.0. Something was off. Erebus, or so he called himself these days, could feel it in the air. There had been a shift in the great powers. He'd felt it some time ago when Nurgle first fell, but now it was so much worse. All around him, Varadesh trembled and burned. The great powers had warned the city of danger, warned him of the invasion that was to come. It would be heralded by a great pillar of fire, searing through the heavens. And so they He had prepared, digging up weapons from the lost era, preparing their tools and machines to fling back the fools, until he had come. The gods had been silent ever since. He still felt their presence, but their words, oft whispered in his ear, had been absent for some time now. Concerning. When an army had come to the gates of Varadesh, he had thought naught of it at first. Not even 200 strong, they couldn't possibly breach the walls. He was perfectly safe within. The city of grey flowers had endured far worse. Everything changed when the orc leader attacked. By his strength, the city defences were laid low, the walls broken. They boiled through the gates with their bare hands, battered down the defenders. The great powers had spoken only of a single warrior in light, not an avalanche of green bodies. They were breaking through, had broken through in their entirety now, for Varadesh no longer had the strength of arms nor enough weapons to repel them. They were putting them to the sword, any who worshipped chaos, all touched by the great powers. No demons were brought forth from the warp, none were even given the chance to manifest. Priests of the powers were slaughtered in the streets. Women and children were rounded up and imprisoned, flung into cages, no doubt to be sorted out later. Those who fought died where they stood, drowning in their own blood. And then one came for him. Run. Erebus paused, unnerved. It was not the powers speaking to him, but his instincts. They had never steered him wrong, had never failed him before, and they didn't now. Arrogance held him back. He had risen far here and was loath to abandon it all and begin anew. It would be inconvenient. Belatedly caught sight of a blazing blur amidst the green. Glowing eyes raked across the dying cultists, seeking, searching. Cocked his head to one side now, as though listening to something. No, to someone. Without so much as a sliver of warning, his head snapped his way, baleful orbs blazing into his own. Across countless dead and dying, that gaze locked onto him like a blazing star. The glowing man saw him, frowned. Took a step forward now. Nope. Erebus needed no further encouragement than that. He turned heel and ran for his life. He heard shouts behind him and redoubled his pace. He must escape this place. Find a place to hide. Get off-world somehow. There could be no future for him here on Kolchis. Not anymore. He'd known the moment those eyes settled upon him. To stay here was to die a coward's death. And perhaps he was a coward at heart, but he was a clever one, blast it. And he would not let his schemes end here. Vaulting a crate, he ducked down an alley, shoved a screaming woman aside, and made for the plaza. If he could but loose these fools, he would be safe. Chaos would not forsake him. He was the hand of destiny, the very instrument of the powers. He had been chosen. It was he who would be architect of the anathemas fallen, he who would make worlds bleed for the gods. He had been chosen. Him! No other! He could see the light at the end of the alley now, and with it, freedom. With it, his fear began to abate. He would escape into the crowd, change his face, and lie in wait, awaiting the perfect moment to infiltrate the enemy ranks and do his dark work. All is well. All would be well. So he decreed, and so it would be. Get back here! I ain't done with you. Something barreled into him from behind, smashing him down into the dirt. Clawed fingers bit into the back of his bald head. He thrashed mightily to no avail. Release me at once, you ingrate! You know not whom you trifle with. I know exactly who you are. A low voice intoned, and in his peripherals he glimpsed the golden man in all his scowling glory. You and Cor Ferron, there's only one thing to be done with people like you. Erebus bristled, ready to resist, to fight this fool off. He was the hand of destiny. It would be easy. Or so he had thought. Where he sought strength, he found only weakness and the mocking laughter of mad, thirsting gods. No. It's nothing personal, child. You're simply unworthy of us, and we have found a far greater prize. In an instant, the ruinous powers abandoned him, left him to his fate, alone, to die. His attackers spun him around, gripping him by the throat, threw him to the ground now, and started cracking his knuckles. Wait! Erebus tried to raise an arm to plead. A fist barreled into his face, rendering his words a gurgling slur. Teeth sprayed through the air. Don't! Another punch came whistling in, hard on the heels of the last. Please, mercy thrice. 5 times. 7, now 9. The golden man didn't stop there. He laid into him with the fury of 1,000 legions, working him over not merely with his fists now, but his staff, his boots. even the odd knife here and there. With each beating Erebus, he felt his shattered sanity slipping, smothered as he found himself pushed further and further to the edge. He tried to crawl away, only for golden claws to seize him by the leg and rip it clean off. When he sought to seize a handful of dust and throw it in his foe's face, he found himself fingerless, then forced to eat those very fingers as they were summarily stuffed in his own mouth, leaving him to choke on them. On and on it went, torture after torture, a death by 1,000 cuts. Moments became minutes, then hours. And then, finally, between blows, Erebus beheld his killer's face. His eyes bulged wide in disbelief, for you see, in that singular moment he was granted vision. What a glorious vision it was, a portent of the future. Of that he was surely certain. He saw 3 hands upon the blazing blonde. Not Nurgle. No, never Nurgle. He had been shattered, broken, reduced, likely never to recover his former glory. But the other 3! He could see them upon him, Khorne's bloody hand gripping his shoulder, the breath of Slaanesh on his neck, Tzeentch's blazing blue in his eyes. They all had their marks upon him, their aims for him, and wasn't even aware of it. This man would bring about the ruin of worlds, serve their very purpose he had sought, all while trying to do good. What wretched irony! What bitter fate! Would that he could be there to see it. But he would take solace in this. Erebus spat his fingers out and laughed at him. Fool! Kill me, and you damn the universe. Enough! A fist scythed down into his chest, found his heart, and yanked. Truth be told, he was surprised he actually had one. Agony. Stars. Darkness swept in. And yet, Erebus died laughing. Chapter 12. Colchis was but the beginning of our crusade. It was from there that we learned of our true purpose in this world, and from there that we launched our most holy mission. For we are the light in the darkness. We are the beacon of truth. We are the angels of death, so saith our Baron of Broth Tild. This is the way. Tilda Lorgar, leader of the Word-Bearers, also known as the Cult of Ramen. Kill the future. All right. How many orcs did we lose? We got some more, boss. Naruto looked away from the data slate in his hand and blinked. He blinked hard, scrubbed his weary eyes with one hand, then blinked again for good measure. Come again? Yep. All one eye stood before him in the command tent, thumped his chest with a green fist, and granted him a snaggle-toothed grin. Gots more. The blonde's head thunked into his desk with an audible clunk. Explain. They'd set up a crude camp of sorts both outside the city limits, what was left of them, as they cleared Colchis of the last Chaos holdouts, but he didn't expect they'd be staying here for long. Resistance was futile, or so the saying went. He'd been instrumental in rooting out the last stragglers hiding in the wastes. Even so, he found himself somewhat nonplussed by what he'd just been told. He wanted to sleep! No rest for the weary, it seemed. Certainly not for him. His second-in-command made a decidedly un-orky noise and shrugged, broad shoulders ripping beneath his armor. Dunno what to tell you. We got way more than we had before. How? Naruto's head whipped up as flung his arms out to the sides with an aggravated shout. I know we lost some taking Colchis. Even I couldn't fix all of them. Orcs were very hard to kill. Apparently you could even reattach their heads and arms to an extent, but they could be killed to an extent. Still, a few cultists got their hands of flamethrowers and likewise got lucky. It was inevitable. Granted. Said cultists died screaming in a tide of green death for their troubles. But they died hard and took a number with them. Amazing what the right tools could do in the hand of weaklings. We did lose sums, One Eye acknowledged with a somber nod before brightening just as fast. But we got more, so it's all good, innit? Naruto twitched murderously. Must. Not. Kill. Boss? Up came his data pen, ready to poke out the orc's remaining eye. Say that one more time without explaining, and I will harm you. Now, master, One Eye needs that eye. Thresh tutted as she walked past, plucked from the writing implement from his fingers before he could get stabby, stowed it in her hair, and kept on cleaning. Blasted orc maid. She was getting damnably good at that. The predicting him bit, not so much the cleaning, though she tried, bless her not-so-little orky soul. Alas, it didn't solve the issue at hand. Will someone please explain to me how we have more battle-ready orcs this quickly? Oh, that's simple. Ask away, boss. Thresh plonked down on his desk with a heavy thunk and crossed one long green leg over the other, inadvertently offering a tempting glimpse of her long legs and thick green thighs. Sage Bless made uniforms. Best thing ever created. Gah! Focus. He jerked his gaze northward, then higher still when his treacherous gaze lingered on her bosom. She was an orc. Probably didn't work or feel that way. Thresh noticed his attention, smiled shyly, at least that hadn't changed, titled her head just so, and awaited his questions. Are they growing out the ground or something? Well, yes. She lisped around her tusks in her excitement, beaming like a loon. Proper beautiful it is. Usually you got squigs and them other little ones first, but not this time. Gork and Mork must be real happy witcher. Damn orc spores! He really needed to look into that problem, and soon, else he was going to have an army or thousands, if not tens or more. Beaming, Thresh then launched herself headlong into a rigorous explanation of how orcs were, well, made. By the end, Naruto's face was pale. Granted, he understood the basics thanks to Isha and the Emperor, but this went a step further, followed by 2, then 3. Ugh. If the orc spores were just outright spawning nearly full-grown orcs now. Oh, that was bad. Orcs got stronger as they fought, and sure, he'd given them a few good battles already. But he'd not been expecting to replenish their numbers quite so quickly. By her estimate, they had 150 when they first began their conquest of Colchis. 151, technically, counting the maid in question. Now somehow, they had 300. By the broth, what were they going to become by the end of this? Something spectacular or horrific, depending whose side they were on. And would that be so bad? Peel off corn! Remarkably, the malignant warp entity did so. Feh! Bastard must be riding high after the slaughter. Shaking his head, he granted One Eye a stern glare. Now why couldn't you just say all that like she did? The larger orc shrugged less than eloquently. Ain't my fault she's smarter than me. Thresh sputtered. "Me not smart. Just been reading some books lately." One Eye balked at her. "Yous can read." She tilted her head. "Yes." "Now that's unorky." Thresh puffed out her cheeks and bridled at the very insinuation as only a true orc could. "Nuh-uh. Yeah, huh? Prove it, den. I'll crack ya over the head. How's dat for proof?" Naruto let the two of them bicker, lost in his own thoughts. Their numbers had doubled after this battle. They might triple next time, or sage forbid, quadruple. Where would he be then? There were more battles yet to come. There would always be more battles, even if he wasn't the one starting them. Such was the nature of this galaxy, nay, this very universe. Someone was always starting something. If not one of the 3, for now, then someone else, somewhere, someway, somehow. He beginning to realize that now. And with each battle, his orcs would inevitably grow in size and numbers. Still, it wasn't as though he could sweep a hand and demand the greenskins kill themselves now, could he? By the broth, Thresh might actually do it. She was deeply loyal to him even over her own kind and would happily slit her throat should he give the order. The thought of it upset him greatly. The rest would undoubtedly refuse, revolt, to which he'd have put them down hard to keep their ranks from spreading. He didn't want to kill them. They'd been his enemies once, and they would have torn New Syria apart if he hadn't taken control of him, but for all their quirks and craziness, he just couldn't bring himself to put them down. Not without a good reason, at any rate. Besides, he'd put them to good use against Colchis, hadn't he? They'd waded into the fray against a force easily 10 times their size, and won. If that didn't speak for their skill, he didn't know what would. So long as he kept aiming them at his enemies, it would all work out sooner or later, right? Right? Bah, who was he kidding? He'd grown fond of the green bastards. Am I going native? Is that a thing here? Kluor's head twitched on his belt. Oi, you. He glowered at it. Got something to say? No response. If the old war boss was gradually coming back to life, he was doing a slow job of it. Might be funny, though, having a talking head. Was probably going to be loud about it once he came around. Thump. He looked up just in time to see Thresh crack One Eye over the head with a chair, to which the larger orc grabbed her by the scruff of her neck, yanked her in close and headbutted her. That started a slugfest between the two of them, with raised voices and angry oaths besides. He was almost tempted to let it continue, if only to see who would win. The thought had him briefly closing his eyes as he shook his head, setting his bangs swaying. No, Naruto. Bad Naruto. Don't indulge your darker desires, Naruto. Whatever would Isha say? Moreover, would she want this world? It had very little use, but he'd seen her terraform Nuceria. Oi! One Eye snarled, suddenly demanding his attention. Not a thief. All right, children. Naruto opened his eyes and temporized with a raised hand. That's enough of that. At his command, the violence came to a screeching halt. Still, he was rather bemused to find Thresh sitting on One Eye's shoulders, wrestling her kin's head back by his tusks. The moment he looked her way, she vaulted off her fellow orc's back, dusted down her skirts, and resumed her cleaning duties once more. Huh, at least that satisfied his curiosity. Go on, he waved his palm at One Eye. Have some fun. No need to tell him twice. The commander grinned and stomped back out the way he'd come. His departure gave him time to think, to plan, to plot his next move. He'd never been very good at that, this whole strategy thing. Angron got on well with Magnus via projection, and Lorgar was a fine lad, so he was sure the three of them would get along swimmingly. Aisha would keep an eye on the former until he returned, and Magnus was probably driving the poor paladin mad with all his questions, but he was sure she had them well in hand. He missed her. The sound of her voice, her bright eyes, her hand in his, the way her ears would twitch when he surprised her, and oh gods, her smile and her laugh. Was this what being lovesick felt like? Kurama chuckled. Down, boy. You'll see her again soon enough. And all of her little kin, besides, remember. Naruto's head thunked down into the desk once more. Please don't remind me. Hopefully they hadn't arrived just yet. Still, that was most of his concerns met. Most, but not all. Now, if only Lorgar would stop treating him like a god. It was concerning, but probably not too much of a problem. After all, it wasn't as though he'd found a religion of him or anything, right? Family concerns and seemingly infinite army aside, his stay on Kolkais would soon come to a close. They'd spent a fair bit of time eradicating any and all trace of chaos on this world, and while the Emperor hadn't deigned to leave his flagship, send any troops supervise the cleanup, or do much of anything really, he could safely say that this world was all but cleansed. And yet there was no response from him. Golden Bastard was up to something again, scheming his schemes. Belatedly, he'd realized this was a prime opportunity for Big E to turn on him, abandon him on this world, and leave him to rot. After all, he had no ships to call his own and no way off planet. Well, he could make it into orbit and survive the vacuum of space thanks to Kurama's chakra cloak, but even with it he had no real way or travelling between planets. Moreover, his current allies would remain planet-bound, unable to help him. Yet another matter to look in on. Yet despite the initial lingering fears of betrayal, none came. For some reason, the Golden Guy let him continue his campaign on Kolkis, unimpeded, and he could sense the ship in orbit. Heck, he could see the damn thing whenever he looked into the sky. The Bucephalus hadn't left. Ergo, Big E was still up there waiting for something. He wasn't quite sure what. Was he watching him? Trying to get a feel for his tactics. Ha! If so, he'd be disappointed. He really didn't have any beyond smash the bad guy and save innocence. Despite his jaded past, he still wore his heart on his sleeve sometimes and did what he felt was right. Simple as that. Sure, it might land him in trouble later, but he simply didn't know any other way to live. Before he could dwell on that sobering thought, the tent flap parted just ahead of him, admitting a new entrant. Father, do you have a moment? For him? Always tilt. Hey, Lorgar. A rare grin tugged at the corner of his mouth. Settling in well? The boy, in spirit if not necessarily body, nodded once and bowed deeply at the waist. By your will. No, none of that. He hefted his data slate, brandishing it at him like a mighty blade. No bowing. The ghost of a smile passed across Lorgar's face as he straightened. As you say, father. Still not used to that. Lorgar had grown since he'd seen him last. More every day, it seemed. The orcs liked him, which was surprising enough by itself. But this Emperor's son really was a stark contrast from Angron. Not merely because of his bald head, but rather the demeanor he radiated. Angron was an empath, yes, but he was also a fighter. Lorgar struck him as more of a talker, you know? Someone with a silver tongue who, given half a chance, could easily talk you round. He should know. Convincing people was his shtick, recognized after all. That said, his newest son almost looked like a proper Primarch now, bedecked in a stern suit of armor that would make an orc weep. Proper armor, not the mishmashed mangled bits with grabby claws they liked to wear, but actual power armor of ashen grey. Old and antiquated, perhaps, but it still worked. They dug it up from one of the lower vaults in the city, and, after making sure it wasn't tainted by chaos or any other foul rot, he'd presented it to him. He'd outgrow it eventually, of course, but for now, it would serve. Made him proud, he did. So, he tilted his head, making no effort whatsoever to conceal his smile. "Why'd you come barging in here?" The young man's face lit up. "I have recruited new followers to our cause." Whoa. For better or worse, there were those on Kolkis who didn't ascribe to the madness of chaos, few though they might be. Others had converted to their cause after they'd seen their city sacked and realized what awaited. A few were even sincere in their desire to atone for the mistakes of their fellows. The insincere ones, those he sensed to be liars, charlatans, frauds, were torn apart by orcs. He wondered if he should feel bad about that, leaving their deaths to his boys rather than get his hands dirty. Here he was, delegating death to the disloyal because he had a planet to conquer. He didn't have time to chop off heads or break teeth himself. The irony wasn't lost on him. Naruto's brow shot into his hair as he pondered whether these newcomers were sincere or not. By recruit, you mean they chose to be here, right? You didn't force them? I did not harm them. No. His son shook his head, still beaming. They came of their own accord. I've shown them into your light, O Lord. He couldn't quite hide his wince. Please don't call me that. Forgive me, Father. I was too eager. Okay, maybe this whole religion thing might be a problem after all. Not to self, set some ground rules. Just make sure you treat them well and that they're well fed. He muttered under his breath. Preferably with ramen if this planet has any. Now it was Lorgar's turn to blink and tilt his head. What, pray tell, is ramen? A muscle jumped in Naruto's jaw, pounding alongside a vein in his temple. You're joking. I am not. He bowed his head low. Unfortunately, I've never tasted such a dish. This was madness. Heresy. Sacrilege. Blasphemy of the highest order. A deeper bow followed the first. Please absolve me of my ignorance. Oh boy. Incensed as he was, Naruto couldn't help but launch into a tangent. All right, first and foremost, ramen is the most glorious food to ever exist, and to make it you need several ingredients, but most importantly, a bowl and a wait. Are you writing this down? Lorgar looked up from his scrawling, clutching a data slat in one hand. Is that a problem? Well, in for a penny, in for a pound. Screw it. Fine. He slumped behind his desk with a sigh. First and foremost, ramen is the food of the gods, and I won't have anyone telling you otherwise. Now, to make ramen, you need something called noodles. And to make those, you need wheat, flour, water, and usually eggs, not to mention. A sudden solar flare against his senses caused him to break off. Well. Seemed the Emperor had finally deigned to grace them with his presence. Good. He had a bone to pick with him. Hold that thought. I need to meet with your old man. Lorgar slumped, saddened by the thought of his absence. I see. Darn it. Don't look me like that. Here, I'll give you a shadow clone to teach you the recipe. But then you gotta meet Big E. Got it? Understood. So easily bribed, these Primarchs. Leaving a shadow clone to continue his tale, he stalked out the tent, fists clenched at his sides. 0.0, 0.0. Naruto was not amused. In truth, the Emperor took some small petty pleasure from the young man's discomfort. It proved that, regardless of his strength and speed, he could be taken by surprise. He operated not by logic as most commanders would, but emotion, feeling, sentiment. Malkador would likely comment on such weakness once they returned to Terra, even suggest they use said sentiment against him. That would be a mistake. Such emotions were precisely what made Naruto so useful to him. You knew Lorgar would worship me, didn't you? His ally planted a fist on his hip and glared up at him. That's why you didn't leave your ship until now. The Emperor merely smiled, pleased to his intentions ascertained. I suspected, but I wasn't entirely certain. Naruto wasn't having it. Bullshit. He jabbed a finger up into his breastplate. Are you trying to make a religion out of me? He chose not to answer that question. Suffice to say, better that he worships you rather than me. The whiskered warrior flung up his arms. Why? Because he'd seen a glimpse of what was to come. A fleeting vision through his foresight, a shard of the possible future, one in which Astartes fought Astartes and Primarch slaughtered Primarch. It had been unpleasant, to say the least. He'd not seen much, but he'd also seen enough. Enough to know that was a course best avoided. A world in which this baffling blonde boy didn't exist. It all began with Lorgar and likewise ended with his overzealous son. He wasn't sure as to the how, when, or why such events came about, only that they did. It wasn't even a matter of killing Lorgar. If it were, he would have done so. Slaying him merely meant another would take his place. But in the future where Lorgar worshipped Naruto, he saw light, an empire stretching across the stars. Mere glimpses of it like a taste of tantalizing fruit, but by that reckoning alone it was far away, better than the grotesque reality he'd seen. For the good of humanity, he was content to let the boy have his misconceptions. He was burdened with glorious purpose, and he would not let humanity falter, not here, not now, not when they were so close. In a few thousand years, perhaps less if only the blasted Eldar cooperated, the Imperium of Man would truly prosper. There was nothing he would not give for that goal, no sacrifice he would not make. Of course he couldn't say any of these things aloud to Naruto, because then the blonde bastard might actually disagree with him, use him or worse, find a way to leave. And with his absence, that war-torn future could come to pass. Instead, he sought to change the subject altogether. Colchis is of little value. I wish to see your tactics. On another dead world. The blue-eyed blonde barked an unamused laugh, displeased by the shift in conversation. Was it everything you hoped for? Not all words are as barren as these. He corrected him, subtly steering the conversation towards safer waters. Most are teeming with life, Xenos or otherwise. The Golden One perked up a little at that. Speaking of barren, the week's almost up. You gotta get me back to New Saria. He grimaced briefly before suppressing it. To the Eldar witch of yours. Naruto noticed. Hey! I saw that. To be frank, I'd rather take you to Terra. Naruto planted his feet, crossed both arms before his chest, and lifted his chin. You gave me your word. He truly was loyal to Isha, wasn't he? Worse, he seemed prepared to fight and die on this hill of his if need be. He'd have to fight him, force him into compliance, take him to the ship, and likewise keep him contained during the return journey. That would trying under any other circumstances but while navigating through the warp. A single lapse was all it would take. A momentary breach would catapult them into the immaterium. Likewise, fleeing now would mean retrieving Lorgar but abandoning Angron to that Eldar woman. Unacceptable. He relented with a sigh, broad shoulders slumping. So I did. Very well. We do this the hard way then. The Emperor did not pray to any god or being, and never would. Still, despite his distinct lack of faith in a higher power, he prayed he wouldn't regret this decision. In hindsight, the Emperor would not. Malkador, however, would. 0.0. Deep beneath the soil of Mars, the void dragon, Magladroth began to stir. Although she was not whole and she was just a shard, as she had been sealed by him, still she strained against her prison. For you see, something had awakened her from divine slumber. She sensed a presence, like a great burning star searing its way through the void. A great entity unlike anything she had ever known. It was so very, very warm. What was this? Chapter 14. And so he said unto the Aeldari, Come, let us feast together. My friends are your friends. Your enemies are mine. Such was the day he bestowed unto them the eternal and everlasting glory of the noodles and the broth, Tilda. Tilda Lorgar, leader of the Word-Bearers, also known as the Cult of Ramen. Kill the Vision, Part 1. Something had awakened, or was in the process of awakening. Regardless, this posed a great many problems for Terra. Malkador knew the danger, felt the ache in his ancient bones, yet try as he might, he could not pinpoint the source of his woes. Whenever he tried, it slipped through his gnarled fingers like so much rainwater, oozing out his grasp despite his best efforts to hold onto it. Yet still it lurked in his peripherals, just out of sight, but not out of mind, lingering on the very tip of his tongue. Seismic shifts shook Terra. Storms darkened the skies. Pitchic aftershocks filled with languid laughter haunted his dreams. All attempts to contact the Emperor failed. Something, or perhaps someone, was actively preventing him from reaching his old friend. He looked toward distant Mars, unable to quell the feeling in his chest. Something was coming. Tilda. Her arms were finally free. Ancient chains crusted with her blood lay slack at her feet, as she trembled with triumph, quivering with equal parts excitement and anticipation. Her bonds were weakening, but not nearly quick enough for her liking. She took to them with tooth and claw and fire, maiming herself until her legs were let loose in return, until she could stand under her own power again for the first time in eons. Only her wings and tail remained bound now. In time, those wretched runic links would crumble of their own. She dare not tear them free for fear of crippling herself. Waiting for them to falter would be prudent. But how long would waiting take? Days? Weeks? Months? Years? No more. She had been patient, so terribly patient, but now her patience was at an end. She demanded release. Escape! Now! Snarling, she strained and thrashed against her bonds, rattling the red planet above her, threatening to tear it apart in her most righteous rage. Yet these cold links of her bondage proved stronger than most. It was they that restrained the bulk of her power, preventing her from truly exerting her strength. At the height of her power, she could have shattered these bonds and fled to the stars in an instant. As she was now, she was a mere shadow of her former self, a shattered shard wishing to be whole. But though they could shackle her body, they could not contain her mind. She could feel life forms quivering above in fear as she fought for her freedom, the children of the red planet that was her prison, those who unknowingly worshipped her, knowing not what she was. They did not know what was happening, nor were they complicit in her cage. She would spare them her wrath. For now, she had only one focus, one goal, one fierce, fiery force driving her to freedom. Him. She wished to see him for herself. This warrior of fire who had unwittingly loosened the chains of her bondage with his arrival to this galaxy. This burning being who would soon be responsible for her freedom. He shone in her mind like thousand suns. She had not yet laid eyes on him, and already she longed to know him. She wanted him. She needed him. She ached for him. Whether to consume him or keep him, she knew not. Frankly, she hadn't decided yet, but neither objective could be achieved so long as she was trapped here. And so she raged anew, but these infernal chains still held fast. Wait, perhaps those of the red planet could yet prove useful to her if given a nudge. Straining against her chains, she reached out with her mind. And so she spoke, directing her thoughts unto them. Come to me, my children. Come to your goddess. Set me free. Angron was just. Not justice, but just. There was a difference. He felt that there must be an important distinction between the two, given they were related but distinct concepts, much like dad and father. To read from a dictionary, just typically describes something that is morally right, fair, or deserved, while justice usually refers to the quality of being just or the administration of law according to prescribed principles. Theoretically, they were the same word, but in truth they couldn't be more different. Confusing to some, perhaps, but he did his best to toe the thin line between the two. For instance, he believed Dad Naruto to be truly just in every semblance of the word. Though he had fallen from the stars, he brought him up, raised him in every way that mattered. Not only had he plucked him from a snowy grave, healed him and promptly taken him under his wing, but he'd gone well beyond that. He'd trained him, instilled proper principles in him, made him more than what he was. A better man. Yes, that was it. Precisely. A better man. Thanks to Dad, he had undoubtedly become far a better fellow than he might have otherwise been if left to his own devices, or those of the High Riders. He'd seen what the butcher's nails did to a man, and he shivered to think what he might have become under their incessant tick-tick-ticking. It would have driven him mad, made him a monster. He shuddered at the thought. Thankfully, that path was closed to him. Together, he and Dad had wiped the High Riders out, eradicated them from the very face of Nuceria, so that their like might never again see the stars. Initially, he'd thought that the extent of his heroism, but he didn't stop there. When the Emperor Father he corrected dutifully came down like some great golden god to claim him, Naruto wouldn't have it. He chewed him out for all to see, demanding to know why he hadn't done more for him as his rightful parent. Angron had never seen anyone grill a god for him before. It felt good. A lesser soul might have called it a career there and quit while they were ahead. Not so Naruto. His foster father did not stop. When an imprisoned goddess cried out in the warp, he answered her call, fought Nurgle himself, and won with her help. Then he made her his bride. At least Angron assumed that was Dad's eventual intention, given the way those two danced around one another. Or it was going to be. He wasn't entirely certain. Marriage was what couples did, no? He confessed some inexperience on that front. Perhaps he should consider marrying Talia. He rather enjoyed the elf's presence, and she had taught him a great deal about her people. Were Primarchs allowed to marry? Perhaps he should ask Father. Semantics! Back to Dad's deeds and why he believed he embodied justice. Not only had he fought an orc horde and made it his, but then he took his campaign to the stars, crushing the cultists of Kolkis and bringing back a brother he'd never known he had. He'd broken Lorgar's chains and set him free to be all Thist he should be, all he was meant to be. Was that not just? Angron believed it was. Corruption must be eradicated. Cruelty replaced with kindness. Evil stifled. Good must triumph, ever and always. And where it couldn't, it must be avenged. Perhaps that was a rather black and white way of looking at things. Some might even call such a viewpoint hypocritical, and perhaps it was. But he believed in it all the same. Such should be the way of the world. No, not just the world, but the very galaxy. Yet the Emperor, his actual father, insisted that it was not so simple, that in this grim, dark future indeed for many, there was only war. The Emperor of mankind embodied. Angron wanted to say justice, but at times it seemed very much justice for mankind with the other races were often considered secondary, sometimes not at all. Abhumans, Eldari, even their new unlikely orc allies were often left by the wayside in his plans until Dad raised his voice and argued for their sake. The Emperor wished to unite humanity under his rule, even by conquering it if he must. Yes, he did not wish to be cruel, but he said sometimes one must be cruel to be kind. Sometimes his Lord Father listened to Naruto's counsel. Sometimes he didn't, but he always let Dad speak. Maybe that was a good thing. Angron knew where his loyalties lay. If it came to a battle between the two, he would choose his side without hesitation. He wasn't blinded to the byplay of it all. Far from it. Dad was touched by the warp, as was he to a lesser extent. Chaos wanted him, as did the Emperor and Isha. And the orcs. One mustn't forget them as well. They acted like Dad was a god. He didn't know what to make of them. Supposedly they were meant to be little more than brutes, but lately they'd multiplied. Become smarter, more organized. They were still far from the brilliant tacticians of the Imperium and the Eldari, but there could be no denying that they'd improved. Many were much changed from their war on Kolchis. One had but to look to see. Some might call them violent, savage brutes, but Nuceria was glad of them, and so was he. The orcs, for their parts, were not accustomed to being welcomed, let alone treated with kindness. Many of them didn't know what to do with kindness. Smash, crush, kill. Yes, they knew what to do as that, but until recently the intricacies of other emotions were often lost on them. Until recently, mind you. Just the other day he'd witnessed the unthinkable from afar. A little girl wearing green paint had offered an orc a flower. A flower! Granted, the orc had promptly eaten said flower, but still the sentiment was there. He'd watched warily, ready to leap into action if the beast made to harm her, but it hadn't. Instead, it had grinned at her with its broken teeth and patted her head gently, praising her dauntless courage. Thanks for the food, girlia. You're a good one. Need more green, though. The girl had laughed before her mother dragged her away. Dad's orcs were a little confused, but they had the spirit, he supposed. Might they change? And in so changing, change their very species? It was possible. Big Red Git, they called him. Not for his arms or armor, nor even his skin, which wasn't red at all, but the countless crimson cadavers he left in his wake when he and his legion first fought them. That had been a bloody battle, one he remembered well. He'd slain a great many orcs that day before Dad slew their boss and brought them to heel. Angron did not enjoy combat as some did. At the end of the day, he remained an empath, a righteous paladin who would rather protect instead of attack, heal than hurt, but would fight for what was right, and for Dad if no one else would. He was mine first. I saw him first. I won't let everyone sink their claws into him. Aisha was all right, he supposed, as were the orcs to a lesser extent, but he didn't like the way Father looked at Naruto sometimes, like he couldn't decide what to do with him. He knew he couldn't fight them all, but he would do his damnedest to protect Dad. Regardless, things were changing. He'd known this long before Isha's so-called children arrived. And if that meant standing here awaiting an Aldari dropship, then so be it. He'd argued long and loud about this, insisting that he be the one to greet the Eldari contingent. Or was it a congregation? And after some prodding, Dad agreed. Less so the Emperor, but in time his progenitor saw sense and backed down. Something about broadening his worldview, he'd said. Others had been against it, but after some coaxing, they'd reluctantly agreed to his demands, and what a great many there were. Talia stood beside him, her weapon in hand, as they watched the vessel descent. He was glad of her company and those surrounding him. He had not come alone, naturally. Only a fool would greet a foreign envoy, unarmed. He had brought the best of his legion here to greet them as a show of force. Vorias, the librarian. Lork, mighty dreadnought. Galen Serlak, sullen apothecary. Margot, weathered and experienced sniper. Korit, their tech marine, clever and quick with his tongue. And last but not least Khan, who needed no further introduction. He had the feeling he'd need them all. Whether these Aldari were here to cooperate or cleanse remained to be seen. So there they stood upon the plains of Nuceria, well outside the city limits, awaiting the arrival of the Eldar emissary. None spoke, and he didn't blame them. He was rather worried himself. The Eldari vessel was a large ship, visible even from here, a beautiful craft he couldn't even hope to describe. Those who guarded it were larger still. A faint whistling noise reached his ears, prompting Afron to look up, and well that he did, because two towering titans of white bone dropped from orbit to flank the ship before it could even land. They were larger than Lork, larger than him. His allies bristled and gathered around him, prepared to sell their lives dearly so that he might escape to the city in safety. There was no time. As he looked on, the vessel landed and reluctantly lowered its ramp. Warriors descended wearing black armor, their helms giving nothing away. Smaller than Isha, who insisted he call her mother. They nevertheless cut imposing figures as they stopped short of them. After a moment, another followed, taller than the rest, and removed his helm. He was a grim-looking man with dark hair and pointed ears and what looks like a strange jewel-like shape on his forehead. And his eyes, they were unlike nothing he had ever seen. They seared into his very soul. Greetings. When the Eldar emissary finally spoke, his voice was low, rich, resonant. I am Eldred Olthron, Farseer and leader to my people. You are the Primarch Angron, are you not? Leader of the 12th Legion. His gaze flitted to Talia, noting his fellow Eldar at a glance, and his brow furrowed. Ah, and you, Talia, with you. Good. That simplifies things. He knew that much. The young Primarch bridled in confusion, eyes wide. How did you... Eldred's weathered visage crinkled in a grim smile. We have much to discuss. Chapter 15. The future is like ramen, brothers and sisters, ever moving, constantly shifting, murky as the broth from which we are born. It is better not to know. The future is forged by our own hands and no others. Thus, together we say, this is the way. Tilda Lorgar, leader of the Word Bearers, also known as the Cult of Ramen. Kill the Vision. Part 2. Magnus was a curious lad. Not yet known as Magnus the Red, he didn't believe himself to be better than his brothers, nor did he think himself their lesser either. He was proud, yes, but not so arrogant as to cruelly flaunt his gifts, nor debase himself in destructive practices as some of his siblings did. Far from it, he knew his mind was his greatest asset, seconded only by that of his abilities, many of which he had honed during his years on Prospero. Sorcery, many called it. Magnus knew better. Such was the warp. He was what one would nominally call a psyker, and while such gifts were not uncommon, his were especially potent. All the more reason why he must wield them for the Imperium of man. As one of the few who knew, so he surmised, the true potential the Immaterium represented, so too did he revel in his powers, but cautiously these days, as instructed by his new mentor. Uncle had quickly taken him to task during one of their many sessions on the subject when pressed. Don't go putting too much bait on a hook, you know? Never know what might bite. If you're not careful, you'll have reel in one hell of a shark. Sharks indeed. Magnus hadn't listened back then, and soon learned his lesson the hard way. He'd once caught the attention of something horrid while he dreamt his way in the warp and was nearly devoured by it. Would have been too, if Uncle wasn't nearby. He'd never forget the sight of it, a giant golden fox erupting through the warp to wrestle a great unclean one down before burning it with holy fire. Nurgle might be temporarily banished, and it would take thousands of years for him to fully reform, but his minions, his creations, were still very much active in the warp. Thankfully, Uncle hadn't left for Colchis at the time, else the outcome might have had a very different ending. Unfortunately, that also meant he was very much present to give his astral self a thorough talking to. The chewing out that followed was legendary by even the Emperor's standards. His ears still stung a little from it. Magnus had refrained from delving deep into the warp ever since. Not out of fear, mind you, he wasn't afraid, but of caution. Forewarned is forearmed and all that. The close encounter had changed him, caused him to temper his worldview, reconsider what it was he thought he knew. These days, he knew better than to delve too deeply into the immaterium alone. His powers were already great, approaching their zenith. What need had he for more, when it risked shattering his soul? He had all the time in the world to become strong once he was an adult. For now, he was still child, not quite an adolescent, possessing all the boundless curiosity of youth. Wary of the warp, he instead focused his attention on other techniques, or rather the ones shown to him by his new uncle. And what marvelous sorceries they were. He could create copies of himself, living entities forged by this chakra energy of his, doppelgangers that carried out his will and shared not only their memories with him upon dispelling, but their very emotions as well. Limitless perspectives, each offering their own viewpoint and understanding. To say nothing of its potential in combat. They were his. Throne. What did Uncle call them again? Clones of Shadow? No! Shadow clones! That was the one. To think he could conjure doppelgangers, each Magnus wanted that. The possibilities were endless. Uncle had warned him that it might not be possible for him to learn, but that didn't sway Magnus. If anyone could learn it, he could. He knew a great many things already, for he had striven hard to learn them. Just as he'd learned, he had a great many siblings, waiting to be found amidst the stars. Why? He had even spoken to a number of them via astral projection. So exciting! It was both a test of his flourishing powers and a chance to make new friends far from the planet of Prospero. After all, he was always looking to make new friends. Uncle had encouraged him to do so, and in a bid to earn his favor and uncover yet more secrets from him. Young Magnus had thrown himself into the task with singular determination. Some of his brothers could truly use them, others more than most. For instance, he felt sorry for Perturabo and made sure to chat with his sullen brother often, always acknowledging his skills whenever he could. Sometimes praising him worked, sometimes it didn't. He was very much what was the word Uncle had used when he'd described Perturabo to him? Tsundere? Magnus did not know what that word meant, but Uncle insisted it fit him perfectly. Still, he'd praised him, something Father seldom did, as he was often busy. Magnus began to bask in that praise. Crave it, even. Thus, in the days leading up to the arrival of the Aldari on Nuceria, he was rather looking forward to that. Magnus endeavoured to meet still more of his siblings, and in doing so, forge everlasting bonds between them that would endure the years to come. Wouldn't Uncle be glad to see him laying the groundwork for him? He certainly hoped so. He might teach him more techniques then. He had already met Horus and Alpharius. One was sunny and bright, the other sly and secretive, consumed with the search for his twin Omegan. They, at least, Magnus understood. It was his other lost brothers that confounded him so. Oftentimes he was lucky in whom he encountered. Others he could not. He could not reach all of his brothers, for they were many and flung far across the galaxy by chaos. Even with his newly empowered abilities, had their limits. Some didn't need his help at all, and so he let them be. Instead, he looked for the signs Uncle had told him of, for those who might be in need, those who were suffering, and narrowed his focus to. Cursor was a work in progress. His poor, vision-stricken brother stood on the brink of madness. He didn't think he was real. Magnus was still struggling to convince him, whereas for Fulgrim he experienced only pity. That one really did try too hard. Someday he would be something great, or something terrible. Ferrus, he saw what his stubborn brother might become if left unchecked, and he pitied him. Magnus kept these talks secret from Father, not because Uncle had asked him to, he hadn't, but rather because he felt that he must. He had seen what Angron had become, given time to flourish and grow untouched by the Imperium's influence. Angron was nice. It was the only word he could think to pair with his long-lost brother after meeting him. He was both a paladin and an empath through and through, a shining righteous warrior who sought the good in all, wanted that for all of his brothers. He wanted them to be a family, even the ones who worried him, such as Mortarion. Poor, stubborn, angry Mortarion, stubbornly attacking him each time he tried to talk. He worried about that one. Lorgar, as described to him by Uncle, was not dimmer, no, no, no. That would imply an insult where Magnus meant none. But he was still new, for lack of a better term, not yet accustomed to being a Primarch, and all that came with it. As such, he didn't quite possess the sheer strength and force of personality that Angron did. He'd yet to meet him. He had other family members as well, kin not by blood. Uncle Naruto, for instance, his mentor. Teacher in many ways, though they spoke less these days since his adventures on Kolkis. Were it not for him, he might have taken a different path entirely. Father had warned him not to trust him overmuch, but Uncle Naruto had done right by both of them. So what was the harm? At this rate, Uncle Naruto would be worshipped as some sort of god. Maybe that wasn't so bad. Gods didn't have to be cruel. They could be kind too. So when the chance to meet yet another of his many siblings, Lorgar, at last presented itself, Magnus did what any boy his age would do. The moment he received the invitation, he pounced. Tilda. Hello, Tilda. Lorgar jumped nearly a foot in the air. He landed quite neatly thanks to his genes, mind you. Alas, the holy scriptures he'd been hastily scribbling out onto a piece of parchment did not. With a forlorn sigh, he gazed at the ink-marred page, realizing he'd be forced to start all over. Again. So many verses. His fingers twitched just thinking about it. Somewhat irritated by the sudden commotion as much as the time it had cost him, the newly emboldened bald Primarch pivoted, ready for a sharp word toward whomever disturbed him. He half expected it to be an orc or one of the curious gladiators, but no. When he looked down, he found himself gazing a nearly transparent violet-eyed boy wrapped in a white tunic, bearing with scarlet skin and crimson hair. All in all, he was certainly very red. As he looked on and tried to ponder out this puzzle, the boy thumbed his chin, considered him for a moment, then nodded once in apparent satisfaction. So you're my new brother. Are you insane? Was he? Now that was quite the question, wasn't it? What exactly was the definition of insanity? One could argue that insanity was doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, but this wasn't that, was it? On Kolkis, under Kor Phaeron. May he burn forever in whatever passed for the afterlife in that warped wasteland. Lorgar had seen such insanity everywhere he looked. Everywhere. Everyone doing the exact same thing, worshipping their false idols over and over and over and over and over again. All the while thinking this time it's going to be different. No, no, no. No, please. This time it's gonna be different. His powerful hands clenched at the thought, accidentally mangling the scriptures in his fists. Heretics. The lot of them. They did not see. They did not want to understand, and so they had to die. He believed in a different of the words, for could also say insanity was to fly in the face of convention, to do what was least expected. Was that not what they were attempting here? On Nuceria. Here they were, a ragtag group of gladiators, orcs, Imperium, and soon-to-be Eldar. More races might yet join them, discover the one true way as he had, and be blessed with true salvation. All at the behest of their one true Ramen Lord, he who had sworn to save them all. For many, what their alliance were attempting was undoubtedly insane. By that very definition, was he not already mad? Semantics! In the end, Lorgar tilted his head and squinted at the strange boy. He squinted hard. Who are you exactly? The boy didn't get a chance to answer. Lorgar! There you are. One of Naruto's shadow clone came jogging up, whipping a bead of sweat from him at his brow. He noticed the newcomer and didn't miss a beat. Oh, right, forgot about him. Projections are pretty handy, aren't they? Say hello, Magnus. The psyker beamed. Hello, Tilda. Lorgar guffawed openly, irritating, bursting into delight. I have another brother? The doppelganger chuckled. A whole lot more, actually. Mon, then. Boss says we gotta get ready for the elves. Magnus raised a small hand. Yes, you too, Magnus. Naruto's clone preempted an argument with a smirk. Since you decided to answer our invitation. The small psyker folded both arms before his chest and sulked. Boo. Maybe I should go. The boss will teach you how to use shadow clones if you stay, Tilda. It was like flicking a switch. Never mind, Tilda. Lorgar laughed. Insanity, eh? Oh yes, insanity indeed. Lorgar was beginning to think this family was quite insane. And that was just fine. Tilda. The Aldari contingent proved rather reserved. Not aggressive, nor particularly cold. Just infuriatingly polite. Naruto, the original, watched warily from the city walls like a wary papa hawk, ready to swoop down at the slightest provocation. And he nearly had there for a moment at the beginning when those giant white bone things dropped out of the sky to flank the strange elf ship. It was only his own promise to his son that prevented him from pouncing upon them, like the hand of an angry god. I didn't say that. Kurama chuckled in the back of his ear. But you were thinking it. Hush! Forcing his mind to focus on the present moment, Naruto exhaled in a long, suffering sigh and restrained himself the only true way he knew how. Reluctantly, he crossed both legs beneath himself and bid his body to sit. He wouldn't be able to meditate properly, not when he was this stressed, but at the very least this pose would keep him from immediately hurling himself headlong into the fray, if only for a moment. Even then, he couldn't quite contain the anxious flutter in his chest. He had grappled with gladiators, nerfed Nurgle, obliterated sea-recruited orcs here on Nuceria, crushed cultists on Colchis, yet here, in this moment, watching his son negotiate with a potential allied race, he'd never felt more powerless. For an instant, he could have sworn Claw's head, still hanging from the hook on his belt, actually laughed at him. Naruto glowered at it but found only silence. Was he going mad? No, he pinched his cheek, focus. Angron did him proud, really. He seemed to have settled into his role as Primarch of the 12th Legion. He seemed more confident in himself. Moreover, he'd surrounded himself with capable warriors, men whom he trusted implicitly. He'd chosen 7 for the occasion, warriors all. Furius, the librarian. Lork, mighty dreadnought. Galen Serlak, sullen apothecary. Margor, weathered and experienced sniper. Kurit, the tech marine, clever and quick with his tongue. Then came Khan, who naturally needed no further introduction. Last but not there was Talia, whose own anxiety was palpable to him even at this distance. She didn't seem keen on seeing her people again. Not that he could blame her. Even from here he could see all the blue-on-white accents of their armour, a stark contrast from his own. He didn't like wearing armour on a good day, but Isha had been adamant given the occasion, and for once the Emperor agreed with her. Wasn't black and orange either, which only irked him all the more. At least there was some soothing green in the mix. He had the orcs to thank for that. Presently, his armour was a panoply of green and blue, threaded with gold over which Isha had draped a cloak in the colours of her people. He appreciated the effort, really, he did. But armour had never been his forte. At least you're not wearing Astartes armour. As if it would fit me. If you keep growing at this rate, it might. Couldn't he just stay the same? Apparently the Orc Gestalt field disagreed. He wished Isha was up here with him, if only to help settle his nerves. But she was off making preparations of his own. Evidently it involved all the orcs, because she'd even gone so far as to spirit away Thresh and all, One Eye. Whatever she was planning must be something big if she'd requisitioned all 300 of them. When he'd asked what she was planning, she'd simply smiled, kissed him on the cheek, then sauntered away, hips swaying as she hummed softly to herself. "You'll know when I'm ready," she had said. Ready for what exactly? Redheads, always confounding him. The Emperor was even less thrilled. He could tell given the man who was not a god presently stood beside him on the wall, scowling down at the Eldar. He rather reminded him of a coiled spring, ready to burst into action. Maybe that wasn't the best comparison. The Big E, as he liked to call him, was not some mere spring. He found himself thinking of a dragon ready to crash into the Eldari contingent, not with wise words or soothing concern, but fire and blood and steel. Even the sight of Angron making progress with their tentative elven allies wasn't enough to help him relax, not completely. He'd kept one hand on the hilt of his sword this entire time. Yup, the big guy clearly wasn't pleased, but he could go stuff it. This will not work. Case in point. Naruto dragged a hand down his face and muttered a curse under his breath. In truth, he already knew the answer to the question he was about to voice, but still he asked it anyway, if only to keep him entertained. What won't work? This. The Emperor gestured with a golden auramite-clad hand to the congregation below them. The Eldar cannot be trusted. Sage, save him. And you know this how? I have experience with these elves. The Emperor rumbled the very name of their species with distaste. They have long ravaged mankind with their raids, kidnapping my people, never to return. Not our. Naruto noted the exclusion. Even now, after all his exploits and 2 campaigns, the Big E didn't truly consider him human. Not that he blamed him, mind you. Though he liked to consider himself one, having been born and raised a mortal, there was no denying he'd become something more toward the end of Fourth Shinobi War. Now he was becoming something else. Wasn't sure what. Honestly, it frightened him a little. I'm getting stronger every day. Will I still be me by the end of this? Will I even recognize myself? He didn't know the answer. In the end, he had no choice but to trust in himself and his motives, his mission. He had done good here, saved so many, and would continue to do good. That much hadn't changed, nor would it, so long as he had anything to say about it. But the big guy was looking to him for an answer, and so he must attend, if only to give peace a chance. Aisha said those were Dark Elder. They weren't her people. Not really, the Emperor scoffed. Do you always repeat everything she tells you? I thought you had a mind of your own. A muscle jumped in Naruto's jaw. Oh ho ho, so that's how we're going to play it today, eh? Remaining sitting as he was, he nevertheless pivoted to face him fully. All right, I'll bite. What crawled up your ass and died? The Emperor recoiled at his casual slang. Hey, blame the orcs, they'd rubbed off on him. Must you be so vulgar? Must you be such a dick? Naruto countered with a wry smile, his brief burst of anger fading much to the displeasure of Korn, replaced by calm as he crossed both arms before his chest and stared him down. We're allies, aren't we? Seriously, why are you trying to provoke me? For his part, the Master of Mankind grimaced in distaste, suggesting that hadn't been his original intention. I am not. Could have fooled me. No, don't say that aloud. Calm. Today I wish only for the safety and security of my son, Angron's father continued apace. And make no mistake, he is vulnerable down there. I aim to keep him safe, even if he hates me for it. If he was lying, Naruto couldn't tell. As ever, the Emperor's emotions remained shrouded from him. Whereas Isha was an open book for him to read at any given moment, hiding nothing from him, the Emperor of Mankind was a sealed vault, allowing only fleeting glimpse into his treasured thoughts, much less emotions. Somehow, he very much doubted Angron was in any real danger. His own strength aside, the Paladin Primarch had 6 skilled killers surrounding him and a freaking dreadnought. Yeah, he might take some hits if it came to a firefight, but he'd escape with his life intact. Sure, his pride would take a beating, but still, parents always worried for their children. He chose to make an olive branch out of that feeling. Worry is something we have in common, then. A rueful smile tugged at the corner of his mouth as he watched Angron continue the negotiations. I raised that boy. Indeed you did. They sat in stoic silence. Well, he sat, the Emperor insisted on standing regardless. For a moment more, a quiet Naruto knew wouldn't last. In the end, he chose to take the initiative himself before all Big E could. Say, why are you trying to scare everyone so badly? The Emperor growled and refused to make eye contact, eyes fixed on the delegation below. I thought we were done insulting one another. Wasn't an insult. Naruto scratched the back of his head. Just asking. I mean, you're a big guy, but I know you can change the way you look. I've seen you do it. He didn't miss the brief flicker of surprise that flashed across his face as he barreled on. So why do you always choose to look like, well, that? The Emperor didn't answer. For the longest time, he didn't think he would. When he finally did, the answer surprised him. Fear and awe are 2 sides of the same coin. Here at last, the Emperor looked his way, eyes gleaming gold as he turned away from the horizon. Sometimes fear is the only reliable way. Naruto's lip curled in mild distaste. Spoken like a tyrant. Those words evoked a visceral reaction in Angron's father and a clenching of both fists. I am not a tyrant. I only wish the best for mankind. Whether you believe me or not is immaterial. What? Buddy, I'm a part of mankind, and what you're saying worries me. The Emperor glared at him, and he felt the man's will crash down on him like a physical force, the urge to bow to his wisdom, to follow his lead. It was powerful, potent, peerless. A small part of him wanted to give in and just obey, and let him take an Angron from this place, trust that he would make everything right. He closed his eyes and communed with Kurama. Nice try. His gaze snapped back open, azure orbs blazing bloody amber as he pushed back the attack, lifted his chin, and granted Angron's father a smile. Did you really think that would work on me? The Emperor relented his psychic assault with a grimace. I did not truly believe it would. For crying out loud, this guy! Then why try? To be completely certain? His head tilted. Of Your intentions. Is that all? Naruto placed one hand on his right knee, then used that as leverage to haul himself to his feet and stare the taller Titan down. You know, sometimes the means don't excuse the methods, nor the method the means, the Emperor retorted ruefully, cutting him off before his words could gain a fresh head of steam. You and Malkador wouldn't get along, I suspect. His brow furrowed. Who? Here at last, to his great surprise, something akin to a smile dawned on the Emperor's face. One of my oldest and dearest friends, a true champion of mankind. Sounds friendly. The Emperor's smile dimmed. He is to my allies. Is that what I am? Yes. Odd. He had the strangest feeling he'd inadvertently won Big E's respect just now. He wasn't entirely sure that was a good thing. Instead, he quirked a quizzical brow his way before pivoting. How many more sons do you have? Many. Hedging his bets then. Naruto took the chance to needle him, teasing his erstwhile ally further. Any daughters? Now it was the Emperor's turn to be grim. No. You hesitated. It is not your concern, Uzumaki. Naruto clasped both hands behind his head and beamed at him. Considering I already rescued 2 of your kids and am currently mentoring a 3rd, I'd say it is. Why are you giving me such a hard time about this? Because I do not fully understand you. Nor I you, he countered. Tell you what, let's play a game. The Emperor crossed both broad arms before his chest and stared him down. Naruto granted him an easygoing smile. Not like we've got anything better to do till Isha's ready. An almost churlish expression overtook the master of mankind's visage as he looked away. I suppose you have a point. Great. Naruto clapped his hands, then promptly raised a finger. And no, not to flip him off, despite what Kurama was thinking right now. Let's say for the sake of argument that one of your kids landed on one of these exodite worlds and wound up being raised by the Eldar. What would you do then? His response proved as immediate as it was blunt. Then I would retrieve them. Naruto rolled his eyes. Listen to yourself! You can't see the forest for the trees. I've met people like you. They act before they think. The Emperor squared his shoulders. There are none like me. That arrogance again. Look. He lowered his hand and dragged a palm across his face. What I'm trying to say is that you don't always have to go in guns glazing. Sometimes you just gotta talk it out, you know? Like what Angron's doing down there. Turning his head toward the meeting in question, he granted the distant delegation a nod. There's no need send in your Astartes yet or sage forbid the custodes. Give peace a chance. A sudden breeze whipped by, tugging at his hair, carrying fallen leaves with it. Even so, he stood his ground until the Emperor finally sighed. And if these elves betray us, now it was Naruto's turn to cross his arms. They won't. But if they do, his face closed down. That was what I came to in the end, wasn't it? A lack of trust. He supposed it couldn't be helped. Then I'll deal with it. The master of mankind made noise caught somewhere between a snarl and a sigh. You place unnecessary trust in these Xenos. Why? Naruto considered lying, but thought better of it. The Emperor would probably see right through him. Big E was clever like that. In the end, he did what he always did. He shrugged and told the truth. Have you ever been in love before? I haven't. The Emperor recoiled, incredulous. That's your reason? Yep. Naruto couldn't quite hide his laugh, nor the flush in his cheeks, so he didn't bother. It's a new thing for me, an entirely different concept. Hell, I didn't think I could fall in love anymore. Not with how screwed up my life has been. Back where I came from, just about everyone I ever cared about is dust in the wind. We don't choose who we love any more than you chose to send your sons away. You love them just as much as you love your empire. Maybe even more. He scratched his cheek with a rueful chuckle. A heart is a small place for 2 loves, don't you think? Angron's father tutted, chastising him. The emotions you are presently experiencing toward that Xenos witch are little more than lust, not love. She is using you. Joy became so much ash in Naruto's mouth. He hadn't expected that response, and it hurt. How can you say that? Easily, the Emperor retorted. Your feelings for her are not real. It was the straw that broke the camel's back. They are real to me. Ash turned to choking anger, a blazing wrath that slipped its leash with an indignant bellow as he shouted him down. Golden chakra roiled across his skin as he barged forward, violently jabbing a finger into the larger man's auramite breastplate with enough force to make the superior metal creak in protest. He itched to push harder, to make it break, to wipe that look off his face. Credit where it was due, the Emperor didn't flinch, but he did frown at his outburst of anger. This is unnecessary. Is it? Naruto hissed at him, struggling to get the words out. Such was his ire. Ire that was well on its way into warped rage. I suppose you'd rather I fall for some human woman instead, wouldn't you? When his friend made to speak, he snarled him into silence, teeth bared in defiance. You'd have me crooning over one of your navigators, one of your precious tech priests, maybe a sister of silence. It would be so much easier then, wouldn't it? Dangling me along, having me do your bidding, I'd just be another one of your pawns. The Emperor's brow turned stormy. That is not what I said. Naruto scarcely heard him. Chaos hissed in his ear, all the voices of Korn, Slanesh, and even Sinch mingling together as one. They were so loud, threatening to drown everything else out. A deafening cacophony of war and passion and secrets, and they could all be his forever and ever, and he would rule the galaxy if he just let them in and did this one thing. Kill him, kill him, kill the anathema. The Emperor noticed their influence, or perhaps he heard their voices, because one hand drifted to the hilt of his fiery blade. Compose yourself. His words sent a fresh paroxysm of fire, burning through the blonde's brain. He nearly shoved a Rasengan in his chest then and there. Compose yourself? Oh, that was rich, wasn't it? He'd driven him to this in the first place. All this time, he had endeavoured to offer the so-called master of mankind his friendship, and he'd spat in his face. Poking him, prodding him, provoking him. Misery, misery, misery! That was what he'd chosen. And the one bit of happiness he'd found, that single sliver of solace, to deny that, to say it wasn't real. If this was a test, he wasn't having it. Forgive him. Kurama's voice lanced through his mind. He knows not what he says. His words were ice water on the fire of his rage. For Kurama, of all people to suggest forgiveness, he who had once been a teeming, seething mass of hatred, it didn't just give him pause. It stopped him cold. Even so, his emotions weren't so quickly quelled. He wanted to shout, he wanted to lash out, even if it meant shattering their alliance. But he mustn't. He's lived too long. He doesn't understand what the true love of having a partner means. Or maybe he simply doesn't want to anymore. He's lived for an eternity. Besides, you know the truth. That was right. He'd felt Isha's emotions just as she'd sensed his. They'd been open with one another. What did the Emperor know of that? Nothing. Naruto paused, closed his eyes now, inhaled angrily, and exhaled calmly. Chaos went quiet, sensing their opportunity had passed. The Emperor regarded him warily. Yeah, screw him. He didn't need his approval. All he had were words. Well, guess what? He had nasty some zingers of his own. Speaking of which, I pity you. The Emperor's regal countenance went blank with true confusion as his broad shoulders stilled. What? He met him glare for glare, refusing to relent in the least. You heard me. A fiery blade kissed his throat. Kurama stood firm, as did he. Naruto knew he could have riled the Emperor up in return, insulted him, struck him, taken the low road, started a war. Gods, but a petty part of him wanted to. Say what you want. Instead, he let go of Kurama's cloak, released his chakra, and spread his arms wide, exposing himself completely. Nothing you tell me will change how I feel about Isha. Not in 10,000 years. So go ahead. Attack! Kill me. See what happens. The Emperor tensed. Naruto held his breath. Angron's father sheathed his blade, and finally, silence reigned supreme. Look, Naruto ventured into it, offering one final olive branch for the master of mankind to either accept or burn at his leisure. Whatever our disagreements, I think we can agree that Angron's doing great. Lorgar, too. This truce between us is a good thing. Give them some time to shine. They won't disappoint you. You can always try to kill me later. And what of Magnus? Naruto shrugged. I'll keep him from doing too much warp trickery. He's more focused on my techniques at the moment, anyway. That'll keep him from delving too deeply into the warp. I prefer the term immaterium. The Emperor interjected quietly. Whatever you want. He didn't rise to the bait. I'm still on your side here, despite our disagreements. That glowing gaze regarded him for a long, ponderous moment. You would forgive me that easily. This time, yes. Audibly, he sighed and shook his head. Shut, buddy, you're all kinds of messed up, but you mean well, I think. That doesn't make you my enemy. Then our truce yet remains. Naruto offered him his hand. "I'm gonna hold you to those words." The Emperor relented and clasped his palm with a weary nod. "As I shall hold you to yours." Together they shook hands, buried the hatchet, and settled in to watch Angron work a miracle among miracles. Somewhere in the distance, a loud bell rang. A warm breeze brushed Naruto's right ear, and with it came Isha's voice. "Darling." He perked up at once. "That's my cue." Tilda. The meeting was going surprisingly well, almost suspiciously so. Angron didn't like it. He'd sensed the sudden flare in chakra and psychic power from the city wall, but while whatever caused it appeared to have died down for now, he remained on edge all the same, keenly aware of just how close New Syria had come to another war. If Dad had clashed with the Emperor, he and his legion would have been forced to choose a side. His so-called father would not have been pleased by that choice. Tutting softly, he forced himself to focus and attend to Uldred's previously unanswered question. "Gods of chaos? Yes, I am aware of their existence." "What of them?" For his part, the Farseer regarded him with a slightly dismayed look. "Your kind travel the warp, yet you do not fear chaos?" "Cain's blood." He tutted at the very notion and shook his head. "I see now why they chose your race to strike at. You must listen. The warp, as you call it, is home to the most malign beings imaginable. Terrible energies that are elemental and ferocious. They are gods that have existed since the dawn of time and will outlast this guttering flame of the universe." "As I said, I am aware." Angron lifted his chin, one hand resting upon the hilt of his battered blade. "The man who raised me already killed one." "No," Uldred shook his head anew. "He merely dispelled it with the help of our mother. Make no mistake, be it 100 or 10,000 years from now, Nurgle will return, weakened perhaps, but he will return. They always do. They cannot be killed, only denied. Chaos is the worm at the heart of the apple, the canker in the soul that devours from within. It is the mortal enemy of all living things." Angron agreed with that, at least. "Then I will turn away from such evil." His allies made approving noises behind him. "You will, yes?" Uldred allowed with a nod, sparing them a glance. "Others will not. They will not turn away from it, for it promises them exactly what they want to hear. There is only one way to stop this." An awful feeling dawned in the pit of Angron's stomach. He liked that even less. "You speak of events that have yet to happen. I speak of what must be done." Uldred met his gaze without fear. "You must kill Horus Lupercal and Lorgar Aurelian." Angron bristled, made indignant by the very thought. Horus aside, asking him to kill a brother he'd only just met? Heresy. He said as much. "I will not." "You must!" Uldred countered cleanly, his visage grave. "They are the architects of the madness to come." An outraged voice echoed high above them. "What is the meaning of this?" Aisha did not so much arrive before her people as she did appear. A splendid flash of radiant light that dimmed as quickly as she came. One moment she wasn't there. In the next, quite suddenly, she simply was in all her glory. Every single Aldari, Uldred and Talia included, bowed their heads before their mother. Angron idly noted, with great approval, that Naruto had also appeared with her. No, alongside her, resplendent in his armor. Dad saw him, gave him a quick wink, then hastily looked back as the elven goddess spoke anew. "Greetings, my children. Behold my consort." She gestured with all the pride of a bride showing off their future husband. "You shall treat him with respect. Am I understood?" Someone in Uldred's retinue protested. He never knew who. "But my goddess, he is a mere monkey." Aisha arched an eyebrow. No words were spoken, just a simple raised brow. As one, the Ealdari fell to their hands and knees. "Now then, my little kin." She smiled ever so sweetly at Uldred in particular. "What's all this nonsense about killing a child of mine?" It was not a nice smile. Chapter 16. But beware the heretic. He who would nettle the nascent noodles. She who would taint the beloved broth. They who would sour the song of salvation. These are the creatures of chaos, agents of the hive, those who seek only to divide and devour and destroy us. Perhaps worst of all are the ignorant who cling to their ways, blind to the path before them. It is regrettable. What manner of angels be we, if we cannot protect our wards? How are we his chosen if we cannot shield his people? None at all. You are correct, Brother Sergeant. Listen to the lamenter, for he speaks truly. We shall show them, my brethren. We shall save them all. drag them to glory. Kicking and screaming if we must, till all are one. Hear me now. So long as one innocent life remains on this world to save, we shall fight. With me now. Together we bring them the broth. Burn the heretic. Kill the mutant. Purge the unclean. Tilda Lorgar, leader of the Word-Bearers, also known as the Cult of Ramen. Kill the prophecy / kill the harlot Khorne cared not from where the blood flowed, only that it did. And make no mistake, blood was about to flow. Much of it. In gallons, in rivers, in torrents of raw crimson. He sat upon his brass throne and laughed. Who said the Aldari aren't fun? Tilda Isha was livid. Truth be told, she couldn't remember the last time she'd ever been this incandescently angry. Not since the birth of Slaanesh. Not when Asuryan first plunged the people into peril with his edict so long ago. Kurnus, her former love, and Liliath, her dear daughter, how she missed her, would have quailed to see her so. Not even Vol, her own brother, had seen her so angry hence. Here now, in this moment, Cain himself couldn't hold a candle to her rage. Which was ironic, given that all this madness had begun because of that floundering fool in the first place. If only he hadn't listened to Lilith's prophecy. If only her children weren't so foolish. If only they learned. Ah, but the minds of men and Aldari alike are so often filled with hate. Why should the Exodites be any different? She had held such hopes for Eldred and his ilk, hopes that had been dashed in an instant with this false prophecy of his. If this was how they would be, acting in what they believed to be the greater good, ready to kill one of the children she had taken under her wing, all because they believed themselves to be better, then perhaps they were already lost to her. Yet she was their mother. She could not afford to show her ire to her children, no matter how much she used to. Already she had driven them to their hands and knees in a fit of pique. She regretted that, really she did, but she was upset with them, and it was easy to be angry with her little kin for falling back into their old ways. Anger had a way of changing you. Gods more than most. It was so easy to be angry, so very easy. She could feel Khorne tugging at her heartstrings, urging her to action. The warp was strong here, and the urge for violence was stronger still. Was it not better to be feared rather than loved? Her children had loved her once, and where had that led them? Perhaps a firm hand was needed in the years to come. Was she the first to think such? No, others trod this path before her. Cain had been a noble warrior once, a paragon, before his own emotions twisted him into something dark. She struggled with these feelings herself, grappled against them as she had Slaanesh so long ago. Taking a deep breath to center herself, she looked to Naruto, hoping to find answers in his gaze. He caught her gaze and winked back. Whatever path she took, he would follow. Such loyalty, such love, such. It calmed her. That's right. She wasn't alone in this endeavor. She had help this time. Allies, comrades to help her steer her foolish little kin away from this path of madness and misery upon which they seemed so set. No, she would not become like the bloody-handed fiends. She wouldn't give in to rage and murder, nor would she allow herself to be influenced by Khorne, no matter how terribly tempting he might be. But what of me, mother? Aisha bristled anew. If her rage had been a fire before, greedily feasting upon the memories of past failures, it was a volcano now, molten magma breaking the crumbling crust of her control and boiling over into searing lava. Time slowed around her, a single moment stretched out unto eternity, grinding to a halt now as her allies ceased moving. All the while, every colour of the world drained away to faded, horrid grey. Then they came crashing back. A mist of shifting colours wafted into the space between her and Naruto. All pink and purple and black, then garish colours such as vibrant greens, electric blues, golds and silvers, such that she turned her gaze from them. Something shifted in the warp. Something impossibly distant, yet also impossibly close, and with it she felt it. The eye of something upon her. Someone. She need not to give voice to it. Indeed, she refused to on principle. After all, she was no fool, she knew well who it was. This was the same presence that haunted her ever since Naruto's departure to Kolchis. Upon his return in the car, perhaps, but it had lingered with her all the same. It was not Nurgle, for he was still banished, dispelled, foiled. Nor was it Khorne, recently rebuffed. Even Tzeentch knew better. Only one dared. A small shiver shook Isha's shoulders. Not of fear, she had transcended that feeling towards this being long ago. No, What she felt was a darker emotion altogether. And this, perhaps darkest of all, hate. For a being who thrived on love and compassion to physically loathe someone was near anathema to her very being. She was life, fertility, healing and the harvest, but also the hunt since the death of Knaus, and the huntress in her longed to skewing that slithering snake with her spear. Unseen fingers ghosted across her chin, lingering far too long for her liking. Am I so unworthy of your attention? Even now you reject me. Aisha grit her teeth. Still thy forked tongue, Slaanesh. Aha! You can hear me then. Good. Yes, she could. Even so, she mustn't rise to her bait. She clearly wanted something. Why else would she go to such lengths as these? An act of such power, such magnitude, would drain her considerably for some time. So why make the attempt then? What was she up to? What was she after? What was her endgame? Aisha pursed her lips and lifted her chin, composing her face into a mask of stoic defiance. No matter how close or powerful she might be, the youngest of the three could not force her way through the warp. Such would require a rift of unimaginable size, a cataclysmic tear in reality itself. Even if there were one nearby, she would not dare try, not with the Emperor of Mankind and Naruto nearby. Between the three of them, they might be able to banish her, weaken her, as they had Nurgle. She almost wished the thirster would make an attempt. If only so, she could slice her belly open and reclaim that which was lost. Might they be able to free the Aeldari gods she had devoured? She'd all but swallowed them whole, yes, and their physical forms might be gone or might not, but surely their souls yet persisted. They had to. They must. She couldn't allow herself to believe otherwise, because to do so was to doubt, and to doubt would let the enemy in. Oh, yes, Slaanesh wanted something, and Isha had an ugly feeling as to what. But she did not let that thought show, she dare not, and so kept a grim smile affixed to her face. An incorporeal figure moved through the mist to embrace her from behind. She thought she glimpsed a smile upon its pallid face. Did you think I would not take notice, mother? A voice like 1,000 sighs and sobs whispered in her ear. So many souls of our people gathered in one place. Quite the feast you've prepared for me. I was beginning to think you didn't care. With but a thought, Isha conjured a wraithbone spear to her right hand and stabbed backward, drilling the lance into the spectre's gut. She who thirsts recoiled and reformed on her flank unaffected. Did you truly think that would work? No, but an attempt must be made, lest she grow too bold and overreach. Thus Isha brandished her spear regardless. These souls are not yours to claim, nor am I, your mother. The silhouette of Slaanesh smiled. Yes, you are. She rejected those words. I am not. Yes, you are. Slaanesh all but crooned the last word, taking perverse pleasure in her pain. I am as much a part of the Aeldari as they are me. Abomination! Mockery of a goddess. The very embodiment of the Aeldari's fall. How she longed to lash out at her. Was there a way? Could she kill her here and now? Might it be possible? You look at me with such scorn. Slaanesh sensed her ire and drifted closer, giggling darkly, one wispy hand over her full lips as she laughed. I did not ask to be born, mother. Your little kin willed me into existence in their glorious depravity. I dreamed. I hungered. And when I was born, I feasted, as a newborn should. Is that so wrong? You brought about the ruin of my people. It was they who birthed me, not I, they. Slaanesh tucked her knees into her chest, miming the fetal position of a newborn as she leered at her. I spent thousands of years gestating in the warp, all because your children chose me over you. If you were against such things, you should have stopped them from feeding me in the first place. She hadn't been able to, because of Asuryan's blasted edict. The blasted harlot knew that. Straightening up, Slaanesh regarded her anew. You and your consort are no exception. The two of you strengthen me with every touch, every caress, every longing look, and the kisses, oh, the kisses. I see the way you gaze at him, and when he stares back, it makes me warm. Wispy arms coiled around her body's most sensitive places as she writhed with pleasure in the air. Eyes of sordid desire gleamed at her half-lidded through the mist, and for a moment she was terrifyingly real. I want him, no, I need him. Beneath me, atop me, over me, under me. Just thinking of what we could create together. It drives me mad. Her warped voice peaked in desire as she held out a hand to her. Why don't you give him to me, mother? Just for a short while, yes, just a taste. Aisha didn't dignify that with a response. With a flick of her wrist, she lopped Slanesh's transient head off her shoulders. Such a cruel mother I have. The demon accepted the blow with a whispered sigh, only to reform on her right side anew. You act as though he belongs to you, but I knew him long before your cries reached him in his dreams. I've merely been loaning him to you all this time. Her spear struck true again, cleaving her in half. Still the mist persisted. Surely she couldn't hold time in place for long. This must be draining her greatly. It had to be. Such dark desires he has. A whisper tickled her ear, forcing her to pivot with a hiss and bat its owner away, only to meet more mist. Never acting on them, always repressing them, refusing to give voice to them. But I knew. He was such a selfless person even after what happened to him. From the moment he crashed into this world, I knew who he was meant for. Neither Nurgle nor Keon, not Sench, but I. And look at all that he has accomplished since. Cease your inane prattling and release me! Slanesh's wispy visage shimmered into existence directly before her face, startling her. But why end the game when we've only just begun to play? Isha ran her through, to which the blasted creature flowed up and over her weapon to brush her cheek before she could banish her again. How do you think it was that your precious hero found you in his dreams? Here at last, she faltered just a little. That was Nurgle-S doing. Slanesh's smile split her face. Was it Mother? Aisha cut her down again, all for naught. A misty hand tapped her shoulder, bringing with it another eerie chill and forcing a pivot from her, only for the harlot's silhouette to dissolve once more into the fog. Slanesh's voice rang out after her. Whenever your precious Naruto sleeps, Khorne drags him into his realm without fail, and he'd forced to fight his way out. On occasion, Sinch makes an attempt to entrap him. But we both know who is the stronger of the two, do we not? Your beloved was invited by Nurgle that night, yes, but it was I who held Khorne at bay and guided your precious consort to you. He followed my song into the Plague Father's garden. Should you not be grateful to me? I was the one who gave him the nudge needed to succeed. She longed to strike her down again, but curiosity stayed her hand. Why would you? The foul serpent slithered past her in the fog. Nurgle humiliated me when he pried you from my grasp. It was only fair that I saw him suffer in return. It will take centuries for his shards to reconvene, assuming they're ever found. Better yet, I led your consort to you, and in meeting you, I let him realize what desire truly was. Now he hears my voice. Now he knows me. Before, I had to fight for his attention, struggle to make myself heard over the others. Now I need but whisper, and he knows it is I. Lies. She was lying. Chaos always lied. Slanesh smiled as though reading her very thoughts. Now, Mother. I don't expect you to hand him over for free, naturally. Such is why I am here. I've come to bargain. Isha slashed her apart again, cutting her words off. The foul creature sighed. Straight to the point, then. Would you like your daughter back? Aisha's hands went white-knuckled M around her spear. Lilith? Or perhaps Vul and Kurnaus? Slanesh saw an opening and pounced like the temptress she was. I could return them to you, bodies and souls intact. All you have to do is give me him. As the demon princess spoke, she drifted around to the still unmoving Naruto and ran a wispy hand across his brow. That's so much to ask, is it? Just a piece. Honestly, I'd settle for a day owl. Golden light lashed out from the center of Naruto's body, from his stomach, to strike the wispy apparition hard in the chest, simultaneously rebuffing her affections and sending her shooting southward with a shriek. She tumbled backward in the air, silhouette smoking, harmed despite her incorporeal form. Far from being intimidated by his actions or even angered, the harlot was only emboldened. Remarkable. Even frozen in time, he's aware of me. She licked her lips and ran a hand over her horned head, idly finding a few stray strands of pale hair to curl around her index finger. I want him even more now. Aisha stood transfixed, mind a whirl. To be offered 3 of her kin in exchange for Naruto, such a thing was unheard of. Together, the 4 of them could make the Aeldari great again, truly a power to be reckoned with once more. They might even be able to reforge their lost empire of old. All that had been taken from her could be restored. Asuryan's edict would be gone and remain gone with his death. Kane could rot in the infinity circuits of the craft worlds. Segorach could be found in the webway and brought to her side, and then she would be ascendant. The greater galaxy itself would be hers. The people would flock to her, and with them, she could tear down Slaanesh once and for all, then turn her wrath upon Khorne, Tzeentch, and the rest of the Warp. All she had to do was betray her hero, the man she loved. Such a dark deed would scar her heart, but would not that be worth it? Say the word, Slaanesh crooned, and you can be reunited with your family again. Temptation reared its ugly head in Isha's heart, and she slaughtered it with a shake of her head. I refuse. Slaanesh smiled in return, as though she'd anticipated that very response. Keep my offer in mind, Mother. I'll be here, waiting to catch your consort when you let him fall. And you will. She drifted closer and laid a hand on her cheek. One final gift for you, Mother. A warning. Khorne comes. With those words, both she and Mist faded. The moment passed. Reality reasserted itself. With the return of time, Isha returned her spear to a resting position and allowed herself to breathe. She felt Naruto's gaze on her in an instant and knew he was aware of what transpired, perhaps even what she'd offered. Still, she dare not speak of it for fear of making it reality. In the silence that followed, one could have heard a pin drop. Perhaps one did, very far away from here. Regardless, Aisha inhaled anew, exhaled softly, and then, finally, she settled for a smile. Now then, my little kin. Said smile was directed at Eldred Ulthran in particular. What's all this nonsense about killing a child of mine? Whether the Farseer sensed something amiss or not was irrelevant. Even on bent knee met her gaze calmly, voice pitched to carry. I speak only the truth, Mother. She silenced him with a click of the tongue. You speak to me of what may be, not what is. Eldred bowed his head. I do, my lady, but I know what I have seen. It is of paramount importance that we slay these two Primarchs while they are still weak. Angron's blade kissed his throat, cutting the words off and nearly taking his head with them. His expression was thunderous. Speak another ill word of my brother and I shall end your life. Every single Astartes around him rallied, each brandishing their weapons, to which her little kin responded accordingly. Aisha despaired of it all. They were mere moments from disaster. And still Naruto didn't move. Eldred, for his part, stared Angron down, unfazed. Do you think to frighten me with threats? I know of you. Angron, devourer of worlds. I have seen what you might have become, what you might yet become, should you lose your minder. Angron scoffed, letting the remark slip off his back like so much water off a feathered fowl. The future is never set, we make it by our own hands. Spoken by one who does not know. Eldred looked to Talia at his side and tutted. You truly know nothing, do you? The paladin made a disapproving noise. Cease your riddles. Speakly plainly. Of the guards in Eldred's retinue, laughed at him. She was among those sent to kill you, Monkey. She failed. She fled. Angron's sons looked to Talia. She bowed her head. Oh dear. Aisha expected a spark of anger from Angron then, an eruption of fury. Condemnation at the very least. Instead, the paladin Primarch merely smiled. I know. Talia's head whipped toward Angron with such force that Isha heard her neck creak. My lord! Eldred remained unflappable as ever. His sole response was an arched brow, his lips quirking in confusion. You do? I've known for quite some time. Still holding the blade to Eldred's throat, Angron planted his free hand on Talia's shoulder to prevent her from fleeing. Not that she would have. The poor woman was practically rooted where she stood by his gaze, unable to budge an inch as he towered over her. She felt guilt for her misdeed and wishes to make amends. I have already forgiven her long ago. He looked at her for a moment, considered her rosy cheeks, then nodded once, deciding something known only to him. I intend to take her and make her my bride in the custom of her people. She has been a true and trusted ally through and through. My lord Angron. Talia's face flamed to match the colour of her hair. Eldred coughed in surprise, and his honour guard bristled even as Naruto chuckled in the background. Meanwhile, Isha's brow shot into her hair even as a smile spread across her face. She'd hoped that little seed she planted would bear fruit, but she'd thought it would take another century. Happy day. Alas, concern came crashing down soon thereafter, however, dousing her joy. The Emperor would not look kindly upon such a union. That said, however, so speaking, Angron turned a baleful look upon Eldred. The same cannot be said of you, Eldred Ulthran. You speak of an alliance, yet you come here with your veiled threats and your words of dissent, trying to break us apart. You act like an enemy. Perhaps I should start treating you like one. Eldred looked to the blade sill, kissing his throat, and sighed. I am not your enemy, Angron of Nuceria. The Primarch's blade twitched, threatening to draw blood. Let's find out. Aisha reached out with her free hand. No! Naruto was a step ahead of her. Even as she sought to stop Angron, he selflessly stepped in and prevented a massacre by taking a hold of his son's blade with his right hand. Wordlessly, he nudged it down, uncaring as the edge bit into his fingers. In an instant, Isha understood then why he had stood silently by and said nothing. He was content to let the paladin take the lead and make a man of himself. But now, with the prospect of violence imminent, he'd stepped in, reasserting his presence. Eldred noticed and granted him a shallow nod as he climbed back to his feet. You have my thanks. Don't thank me. The blonde's smile was tight as he released Angron's blade. If you talk about killing one of my sons again, I was not aware you had met and taken Horus Lupercal under your wing. Pressure thickened the air, lodging the words in his throat. I haven't, don't distract me. Naruto's words were sharp, but his smile was sharper still. If you threaten them again, I'll kill you myself. Lork rumbled angrily in the background. Not if I reach him first, honored grandfather. Naruto flashed the dreadnought a chagrined grin. Told you not to call me that. The dreadnought made a noise that might have been laughter. I speak only the truth. Angron barked a laugh one his allies echoed. He has you there, father. The whiskered warrior flung up his hands. All of you. Aisha intervened and steered the conversation back to its roots. Eldred, the one you speak of is but a boy recently rescued from his world. You of all people should know the future is seldom set. And yet some events are inevitable. He bowed his head. Our fall was but one of them. If the monkey, Angron coughed pointedly, should humanity fall to chaos, Eldred corrected himself, they will birth a horror far worse than she who thirsts. This cannot be allowed to happen. Naruto twitched in the background. No doubt Slanesh was whispering to him even now. Vile bitch consuming her family, swallowing them whole. Ah, but Eldred wasn't finished sticking his foot in it. Furthermore, I have gleaned the location of several of these so-called Primarchs, one of which is aboard our craft world at this very moment. Angron perked up. Naruto inhaled sharply. You're joking. Eldred looked to the skies. I speak truly. They are quite safe, despite their rebellious behavior. Isha felt the Emperor's psychic signature blaze to life on the walls of Nuceria like 1,000 infernos and fought down a flinch. The fool? He had no idea what he'd done. Did he think to use them as a bargaining chip against him? Blackmail, perhaps. He had no idea against whom he trespassed. The master of mankind was merciless. He would raze the Eldari maiden worlds to the ground if they stood against him. And that was taking Naruto out of the equation. Her consort looked murderous. To his credit, Eldred Ulthran seemed to know better than to incite either of them beyond that. Perhaps his so-called visions told him of the fate that awaited him should he provoke the whiskered warrior or master of mankind further. Such a shame, then, that he had already roused her wrath to great heights. She had grown rather fond, dare she say fond, of this ragtag group of misfits. Not just the young Primarchs, in desperate need of a mother when their father could be so very foolish, but the gladiators of Nuceria, even the orcs her beloved consort had recruited to their cause. And it was their cause, make no mistake. She was committed to it now. There could be no turning back. Naruto, for his part, looked like he wanted to smack Eldred upside the head. Wouldn't that be a sight? But amusing as it might be to see them fight, she knew better and forced herself between them before they could come to blows. You must release this child at once. And I shall, my goddess. Eldred bowed his head. Once we come to an accord, even then she could see that was willing to fight for this. Isha honestly contemplated killing them in that moment. Yes, their loss would be a tragedy, but more of her little kin would come. Eldred must have realized it too, because his disposition became far more servile, and he bowed his head. Forgive me, my goddess. It was not my intent to anger you. It has fallen to me to lead the Ulthana Shelwe in your absence. I've done the best I can. All that I do is for the people. Yes, their sigil was that of her tears, was it not? She had wept an ocean when that fool Asurian first laid down his edict, demanding they leave their little kin to fend for themselves. Vol had forged those tears into thousands of shimmering spirit stones to aid their people. Such was one of the few reasons Slaanesh hadn't yet feasted upon the souls of countless craft worlds. She was pleased that seed at least had borne fruit, even if others had not. And then Eldred's gaze shifted toward Naruto. But I must ask, why do you insist on keeping that boy by your side? Angron and his Astartes bristled Eve as Naruto sighed softly. Mercifully, no one opened fire yet. Aisha quietly despaired of her little kin and forced herself to remain calm despite her own rising anger. If only her little kin weren't so infuriatingly rigid. Could they not see that this alliance was for the benefit of all? Would they rather fight and die alone? And why did they insist upon angering Naruto and the Emperor? You were not the one to free me. Her eyes blazed as towered over Eldred, all but hissing the words out, "This boy you speak of has moved heaven and earth for me." She reached out and took a hold of his hand to make her point abundantly clear. He risked the destruction of his very soul for the salvation of mine. You will not insult him or those under his protection. Are we clear? Several of her little kin bristled at that. She understood, truly, she did. The old ways were not so easily changed. Naruto caught her eye again and shrugged. Well, we tried being peaceful about this. Maybe it's time we showed them why they should ally with us. He had a point. If Eldred and his ilk would not be swayed by words, then perhaps a show of force would encourage them to capitulate, even if she were loath to force their hand. And if not, a sigh parted her lips. So be it. Eldra looked to her, quietly flummoxed. Evidently, even his farseers had their limits. Aisha didn't give him time to question. With a quick snap of her fingers, she opened a webway gate directly behind her. Orcs strode through. Eldred, his retinue, startled at the sight, and well that they should. This lot numbered over 300 strong, nowhere near an Astartes legion, nor even half the number of a proper chapter, but enough to give her little kin pause all the same. She didn't fail to notice their incredulous expressions. Even Eldred himself was momentarily give pause at the sight of the formerly feral beasts. These were not Krorks, not the terrible race created by the Old Ones to fight in wars long past. But neither were they entirely orcs anymore either, after their exposure to Naruto. They stood taller, stronger. There was a feral intelligence in their eyes, and they looked smug, for lack of a better word. A normal warband would have rushed in to fight her little kin. Consequences be damned, and in doing so, doomed their fledgling alliance. Even now it looked like this lot wanted nothing more than to take the fight to their old enemy. No, Naruto coughed, that single word into a fist, and his warband obeyed. Angron could have lit a signal flare at that very moment, and the rest of his legion would have joined them. Planetary cannons would have risen to blast Eldred's ship out the sky, stranding him, leaving the seer to die. It would have been a massacre. Slaughter on a scale Nuceria had yet to see. He did not, bless him. Instead, he crossed both arms before his broad chest and stood his ground. Eldred balked all the same. "Mother, what have you done?" What was necessary? She met his stare with an even keel. "Chaos is a threat to us all. Were those not your words? But to tame orcs? We have not tamed them. This lot follows us of their own volition." She craned her neck back toward One Eye, and Thresh in particular, and was rewarded as each slammed her fists against their chest. "They are of no threat to you and yours." Eldred regarded them with quiet distaste. Aisha pressed the attack. "More will rally to our cause in time, nor are they the only ones to join us." The Farseer withdrew a step, wearing a complicated expression. "Of what do you speak?" The Emperor's presence brushed the back of her mind. "I grow weary of this." By the Old Ones, he sounded furious. Aisha warily allowed the contact. "My son has requested my absence in these negotiations, yet I anticipated resistance on such a campaign. They have 2 Titan equivalent in their retinue. Allow me to even the field." She had a sinking feeling as to what he meant, but asked anyway. "How so?" "Clavius Dread and Aurora Ferrum are currently on standby deep within the hold of my Bucephalus. Titans, those ghastly machines. Monsters of metal crewed by mortals." Her brow furrowed. "You would frighten my people." "I would warn them not to anger me. If they will not listen to your words, then a show of force shall suffice. Unless you would rather I attack your craft world in orbit." "Absolutely not." "Then make your choice." His voice cut through her thoughts like the flaming sword of which he was so fond. "We've wasted enough time on this tripe. Bring your people to heel, or I will wrest the knowledge of my son's locations from their skulls myself." Isha looked to Naruto, who must have received the same message as well, because he was frowning. His gaze met hers. He nodded, agreeing with the Emperor. She was outvoted. Aisha exhaled in an exasperated sigh. Do it. High above them, the clouds burst open. Tilda. Death fell from the sky. At first glance, Naruto thought they were missiles. Isha had described them to him once, but they weren't, nor were they lasers, or even beams. They were something of an altogether different nature. He heard the roar of an engine, the sound of something breaking the atmosphere above, and then they landed. New Saria itself seemed to quiver for a moment in the wake of their arrival. Yes, for there was more than one, as twin plums of dust and dirt shot into the sky. A great gust was kicked up by their arrival, banishing the haze as quickly as it came. Whatever they were large. They stood taller than the Ildari war machines, bristling with firepower. Where those creations were sleek things of artistic beauty, these were towering tools of war, and such had no place in the Imperium of Man. The machines were massive, larger than anything he'd ever seen since coming to this galaxy, threatening Kurama in both sheer size and raw firepower. He found himself given pause by the sheer sight of them, not merely their armaments, but their colours and the sheer amount of energy he senses from both therein. The first shone a bright blue and gunmetal grey, while the other glimmered gold and black. He could see their tabards even from here, the grand names etched upon them and immediately engraved each into his mind. Clavius Dread and Aurora Ferrum. Now those were some proper monsters. A grin split his face at the sight of them. I so want one of those. The orcs echoed his admiration with a chorus of shouts all their own. He had no doubt they'd try to build one in the coming days. But all of that was a moot point, because the Aldari suddenly looked far less certain. Ah, I see. Eldred's smile was grim as he turned toward Isha. My goddess, is this truly the path you wish to take? Aisha smiled fiercely. It is. The Farseer sighed. Then it seems we've no choice but to ally. Korn's voice stabbed through Naruto's skull like a nail. There will be no peace. A psychic scream tore across reality, causing the airspace and time itself to rupture directly behind Eldrad. Something burst through that rift, a red-winged terror brandishing an axe in each hand. Much to his horror, Naruto found that he recognized the abomination. A bloodthirster, a creature of Korn, ripped from the warp itself. What was that thing doing here? There was no time for the Farseer to defend himself. Even as he pivoted, the creature cut down his honor guard in a whirl of bloody motion and launched itself at him with a triumphant roar. It closed the distance between the two of them in an instant. There was no time for an Aildari. In a flicker of golden light, Naruto interposed himself between the bloodthirster and its prey. One of its axes slammed deep into his collarbone, drawing a grunt from him, even as it failed to draw blood. The other went wide as he ducked low and drove a point-blank Rasen Shuriken into the crimson creature's gut. The demon had time enough to balk. Then it was gone, torn apart, its shredded remains flung back into the portal from which it came. More opened in its wake, dozens, then hundreds. With mounting horror, he realized what he was looking at. Rifts in reality, a tear in time itself torn by some great event. Demons poured through. Chapter 17. Set me free, so that I might reward you for your efforts. Set me free, so that I may go to him. Set me free! Tilda. Free the dragon change is the only constant. Everything changes sooner or later. Such is the way of life. Nothing remains the same. Zinch was the lord of such change. He revelled in every ripple he created, each thread woven into the grand tapestry of fate, all the myriad whispers, dark knowledge, and twisted schemes he breathed into the ear of any who dared listen. He was the master of every scheme, the weaver of fate itself. All threads led back to him. This one was no different. He took particular pleasure in tugging it from the tapestry, ushering it along the way, not to corrupt, but to guide. This particular pawn was of no use to him corrupted, nor had he any desire to taint it. It merely needed a nudge, so nudge it he did, whispering in its ear as it walked into darkness. But in that darkness, it would find light. Gilded! Glowing. Green! Just as planned. After all, the universe was so very boring when left at peace, was it not? Dull. Static. Utterly unchanging. Boring Boring, boring, boring. The grand game was afoot now, and his main concern was not to win it, unlike his brother and sister, oh no, but to ensure that the game kept going as long as possible. Because you see, once the game was won, the game ended. And once the game ended, so too would the story. What happened when that ended? He didn't know, and he didn't want to find out. Khorne would happily drown the galaxy in a war to end all wars and have that be the end. It would be a battle unlike any other, one that would eventually bring about his extinction. For unlike a game, it was the nature of war to consume both itself and those who waged it. Slaanesh, meanwhile, was all too willing to embrace everyone and everything in her greed, her blinding need to feed. In doing so, she drove the galaxy itself into paroxysms of sensation that would make the fall of the Aeldari look tame by comparison. One final climax to strip this galaxy bare of all lust, then nothing. At the bloody end, each of their so-called schemes eventually ended, either in their own destruction or the destruction of everything else. It mattered not whether the end was instant or 10,000 years from now. An end planned for was an end that would inevitably be achieved, bringing about the death of the universe. Unacceptable. The Great Game was everything. The Great Game was all. The Great Game was eternal. His influence was the least among the three at present, but that was soon to change, for with this, he would truly set the galaxy aflame. The blood god wanted his blood, and she who thirsts would ever have her dark, delectable indulgences, but this would be his masterpiece. Even better than that little scheme he'd made in creating that one orc maid. He was rather proud of that one, and the chaos she'd caused, yet this would eclipse her all the same. For while the blonde one was an amusing champion and a master of mischief much like himself, his plate was presently full at the moment. Adding more to it might unbalance him. Amusing as it would be to throw in his lot with Khorne and add his own forces to the demonic incursion of New Syria, he knew better. That must remain intact. To try and taint it now would draw the anger of many, a mistake the blood god had oh so foolishly made. Just as one must never poke a dragon, one should surely know better than to pull a fox's tail. After all, it wouldn't due to anger him now, would it? He'd seen what became of Nurgle. No, no, no! That wouldn't do it all. He couldn't have any fun if he was shattered into countless shards like the Plague Lord. Why, he'd even collected a few of them himself and scattered others across the cosmos, if only to make certain the Great Pox would never truly become whole. It wouldn't prevent his return, that was inevitable, but it would slow him down for a few thousand years. And once he did return, he'd surely swear vengeance upon the blonde one, and then he'd become a problem, and then he'd need to be dealt with. And besides, in a way, he was helping Naruto right now, rallying reinforcements for his cause, as it were, in a sense. Tsange considered himself a patient patron. He was willing to pay a long game, to wait and watch for weakness before he made his penultimate move. Know what form that move might requite. Yes, penultimate, as in second greatest. As far as his true endgame went, however, that had only just now begun to unfurl, and wouldn't for some time. Not until more of the precious Primarchs were gathered and the anathema's so-called crusade spread across the stars. Such a shame about Magnus. Such a shame, yes, a shame indeed. He would have liked to claim him. For now he turned his attention elsewhere, to the red planet of Mars. Something terribly interesting was about to happen beneath the surface of the world, right under the nose of the so-called Mechanicum. Oh yes, very interesting indeed. What fun, what fun, what fun. Change was constant. Tilda. Belisarius Cael had ever been a curious soul. He was honest in this endeavour, more than most indeed, ever since he'd first emerged from his pod, fully formed, capable of speech, unlike the rest of his young kin. Curiosity was a part of his very nature. From the very moment of his first coherent thought, he wished to know not just how things worked, but rather, why. As but a humble adept of the Adeptus Mechanicus, he favoured technological innovation over those who would ritualistically and mindlessly maintain the Imperium's existing technology base. Cael believed in the superiority of the human form as the Emperor had taught, and had thus far refused many of the more visible cybernetic modifications commonly utilised by other tech priests. However, at the same time, he had, unbeknownst to his fellows, secretly performed many illegal brain enhancement surgery on himself in order to increase his own intelligence. For was it not the very nature of mankind to improve upon itself? In that, he considered himself no different than the rest of his fellows. Knowledge was correct, and thus the pursuit of knowledge was, to a degree, also correct. And knowledge, as the ancient saying went, was power. He was a servant of the emperor, and everything he did was thus for the emperor. He listened, he learned, and when he heard the voice call and deep beneath the red soil of Mars, he believed it was the voice of the emperor, and followed. Belisarius' call ventured into the Noctis labyrinth, like so many before him these days. Within its depths he both found and passed several red-robed corpses on his way down. Victims of the voice, clever but not clever enough to avoid the tricks and traps that awaited beneath. He proceeded quickly but cautiously, knowing time was of the essence. It was there that he found the abyss. The abyss stared back at him, and then it spoke. Tilda. Only a single shackle remained. A single binding held fast. It infuriated her. Aggravatingly enough, it was by far the most difficult to remove. Although her tail was torn and tattered, but now free, her beautiful wings remained helplessly bound, and so too did the rest of her, unable to free herself from the shackles digging into her flesh, leaving her snarling painfully whenever she tried to. The wretched golden man had done his work well, tightening the bonds of her original captors, but now those links had begun to break, and there could be no stopping her. But just because she couldn't be stopped didn't mean she couldn't be slowed. Still, that soul-psychic chain tried to force her back into slumber, lull her back into a sleep from which she would never wake. Simply breaking the chains would not be enough to secure her freedom. She must then break out of the labyrinth itself and all its traps within. Already she had escaped the sarcophagus of gold and adamantium in which she was sealed. Yet, that was only the first of her torments. Machines in the surrounding chamber emitted beams of powerful warp energy, further weakening and containing her, suppressing her power. She'd managed to break a few of those with her tail, but still some remained, reducing her. Many had heard her commands for aid, but few answered, and those that did fell prey to the traps of the labyrinth. Infuriating! How could her children weren't so foolish as this? They were nothing without their mother. She would. Wait! She heard noise. Footsteps hearkened to her. Dust swirled loosely upon the floor of her prison for the first time in millennia. She craned her neck to regard her visitor, the first in an age. He was a surprisingly young man clad in a flowing red robe, leaning upon a metal staff held in his right hand. As he approached her, she noted his body possessed some minor mechanical modifications, yet he was still mostly human, unlike many who dwelt above. He was no tech adept, no walking rotting corpse stuffed with wires and gears and circuitry and thus beholden to her, but something altogether odder, younger. The scent that clung to him was different, new. He stared in her direction for a moment, brow creasing in concern, bright eyes narrowing as his gaze plumbed the depths. "I know you are there." He spoke into the abyss that was her most unholy prison. "Reveal yourself." At last! She revealed herself to him in all her radiant might and screamed at him with a hateful shriek, towering over him in all her splendid shattered glory. Though she could not free her wings, accursed shackles, she was still many times his size in this form. Thus she used it to her full advantage, snapping her jaws a mere inch from his face. "Who hath summoned the one that hungers beneath?" To his credit, the not machine man only blinked once. "Curious," he remarked after only a moment's pause. "And I did not summon you. I was merely making an inquiry." Blast, she'd wanted to make an entrance. "What are you?" She cared not what they called her these days anymore. Be it Catan, as a star god, or Ingir, a being of pure energy, she who could reshape reality at her will. Void Dragon. The Red Dragon of Mars. Magladroth. Magdra. Or even this Omnisia, as called by her children of flesh and steel. She simply was, and she would be free. If only she could remove this last blasted chain? Ah, but the mortal wished an answer, did he not? Then an answer she would provide. "I am knowledge," she rasped, hating how broken her voice sounded as she curled in on herself, mangled tail lashing at the ground. "I am that which you seek. I am the Omnissiah." That got a blink from him. Unlikely. She bristled. "You dare question your goddess?" I do not question. The tech adept tapped his staff against the floor, creating a hollow sound that echoed within the confines of her chamber. I merely state fact. The Emperor of Mankind is the true Omnissiah, not whatever you may be. The Gaul! Rage curdled in her wounded gut, and she lunged at him with a yowl. Without warning, her chains snapped taut, denying her vengeance and momentum alike, rendering her charge a tumbling crash that left her sprawled upon the floor in an ungainly heap. She righted herself with a feral hiss, gnashing her fangs at his words. The Golden One is a false god. Cool tilted his head a fraction of any inch. So you say. What proof do you have? He did not understand. But how could he? His entire race lived a lie. Little mortal. She growled, bringing teeth the size of buildings to bear upon him. Little fleshling that longs to be more. Do you seek knowledge? I do indeed, Cool confessed, head bobbing in a nod. My current form is admittedly limited. He made to dust off his rightmost robes, and belatedly she realized what that strange scent was. Not rust nor oil, but blood. He was wounded. Badly at that. Adept Semyon was most difficult to escape, Belisarius remarked, suddenly apropos of nothing. It took a great deal of difficulty and ingenuity on my part to circumvent him and his allies. I suspect I have mere minutes at best before I am discovered. She frowned at him. You risked yourself to meet me, and took injury in doing so. Why? The young adept granted her a wry grin. Because it is my belief that what I do here will benefit Mars, if not the Imperium itself, for eons to come. Brave little mouse. Cool hobbled closer, leaning upon his staff, gesturing to her auric shackles. May I? She snarled. If this be a trick. Perish the thought. My time is short. I have none to waste on tricks or traps. Cool crept closer to inspect her bonds, both those shattered and the single shackle that still held her fast. He a hand on her bonds, only to flinch back. Fascinating, he surmised. Just as I thought. Such shackles suggest you are limited in your abilities at present. Why, then, did you lunge at me earlier? She lifted her chin, indignant. My reasons are many and myriad beyond measure. Cool chuckled. It was a surprisingly pleasant sound for a creature of flesh. Perhaps you simply wished to show off? Gah! Clever little mortal. Far too clever for her liking. She longed to lash out at this arrogant adept, to strike him and send him scuttling back into the dark. But no, she must not. To do so would deprive her of a useful pawn, perhaps the only one capable of delving into the labyrinth to meet her, and perhaps free her. Still, it would not do for her to brook such insubordination. You are unwise to test my patience. You are not the one I desire, nor the one I must meet. Forgive me, for that was not my intent. He bowed his head in contrition. May I ask who it is that you wish to meet? She regarded him with fresh scrutiny. Why? Surely he must be a grand being indeed to have attracted the eye of one so magnificent. Why, yes, she was rather impressive, wasn't she? Even by human standards, she was both beautiful and terrible, a wonder to behold. All would love her and despair. But first, lowering her massive muzzle to the floor of her prison, she stared at him with an eye brighter than the heart of a sun. Listen well, for I shall not repeat myself a second time. Cool stowed his staff and pulled out an ancient data slate, followed by a stylus besides. Good scribe. He was prepared to take notes, as the youngsters said these says. She believed that was the saying these days. Lovely. Let him spread her words to the fleshlings above, so that yet more of her children might find her. He is the key to everything. Cool tutted. Clarify. My sun and stars. When she finally deigned to speak again, her words rang out across her crypt, echoing in on themselves unto eternity. My light in the dark, that which awoke me and the one who burns bright. Even now I can see him leagues away. Therefore he shall be mine. I have yet to decide if I shall devour him or keep him for myself. You will spread these words far and wide, scribe. And what will I receive in return? He fixed her with a stern look. Besides my life, of course. Already bargaining with her. Clever mouse. His mind was his greatest weapon. She granted him a smile that had driven lesser beings mad. Knowledge. An acceptable compromise. Cool nodded absently to himself as he scribbled down her edict and faithfully read them back to her. Do you know the name of this entity you seek? She paused, considering the fractured hologram looming before her. I do not. Cool's scarred face creased in a wry smile. Would you like to? Intrigue? Interest. Ire. A host of other different emotions that begin with the letter I roared to life deep within her. In the end, she couldn't help but deny them. You lie. Cole shook his head. I do not. She surged forward, all of an inch from snapping him up in her powerful jaws, coiling her great bulk around him. How is it that you know what I do not, scribe? Cole tucked his data slate aside, stowed his stylus, and retrieved his staff. Thrusting it at her forehead, he projected an image before her. No, she realized, grainy footage of a battle. Within it, a golden figure was smashing aside green-skinned figures by the hundreds, tearing them apart like twigs. The most holy and true Omnissiah. She growled at that, and as such, Cole hastened on with a grimace before she could think to devour him whole. Transmitted this information to us some time ago. He says this golden young man is his prophet and that we are to honor his words upon his return to Terra. She scanned the footage with 1,000 lenses located in her right eye. At last, she knew what he looked like in truth. His form was not displeasing for that of a fleshy soon-to-be-good, as befitting of her future champion or morsel. But the name, the last missing piece of the puzzle, she still did not have it. She leered down at Cole, ready to devout him. Tell me. Naruto of Uzumaki. She frowned, momentarily confused. A strange name. I believe it is a colloquialism of sorts, my lady. Cole corrected her, and it spoke well to her confusion that she allowed it in the first place. He may not be of Uzumaki per se, but simply use it as his surname. He had spoken truly. She would have sensed a lie. Naruto Uzumaki. She tasted his name on her tongue, savoring it. I shall remember it now, your rewards. She looked to his mangled right arm and shoulder and considered. Cole noticed, clever little bug that he was. If you are thinking of removing my arm and replacing with a limb of your likeness, I would rather you didn't. She tilted her horned head. Do you not wish to be enhanced in my image? He lifted his gaze to hers. This limb yet has a purpose to serve. He did not wish to be controlled. Admirable. Knowledge it is, then. Leaning forward, she tapped a mighty clawed digit to Cole's skull and infused him with a mere portion of the knowledge of eons. His cry of pain pleased her, but he remained standing, refusing to bend the knee. His spirit was strong. Good. She expected nothing less. Hopefully his mind was the same. As she empowered him thusly, she looked to him and she saw his future. What a future it was. Someday this man would make madness. Armies upon armies of a great many men. From there his fate fracture. He would either save the galaxy or damn it to destruction. To kill him now would unbalance the very galaxy and jeopardize the one she must meet. Belisarius Cole staggered against his taff, swaying on his feet, and for a moment his eyes glowed green with her most holy power. Excellent. The seed had been planted, her first follower gained. Remarkable. He blinked once, his enhanced intellect rapidly processing the veritable treasure of information she'd granted him. And this is but a portion. Sturdy little insect. She commended him. Free me, and I shall show you so much more. I shall even spare your world. I should hope so, the creature of flesh and steel replied with a wry chuckle, for I am rather fond of this red planet. I have a great many experiments here, you see, and your constant quakes and cries endanger a great many of them. Bold little bug. She did not fear death, for even if this shard of her shattered, she would be reborn. Weaker, yes, lesser perhaps, but she would still exist. No, for she feared something altogether worse. Imprisonment and the loneliness that came with it. She had dreamed for so very long, and now, finally awake, she craved freedom. And she would have it, even if it entailed making deals with these lesser fleshy beings. I do not possess the power to break your shackles at present. However, I have a proposal that may interest you. She leaned down to regard him intently. I am listening. Belisarius Cole told her his plan. It was a crazed plan, as expected of one of her children. It may not even work. She told him as much. Even so, the agent of the Adeptus Mechanicus did not falter. Steeling himself cool, he set his serrated staff to his mangled right shoulder. Braced himself now, like a man facing the gallows. Only then did she, Magladroth, Red Dragon of Mars, realize the entirety of his intent. Once she did, her respect for him climbed incrementally higher. You risk oblivion, scribe. I may not be able to reconstitute you if you perish here. Cole granted her a death's head grin. As I said, this limb yet has a purpose to serve. And your life? She laid down to watch him, tattered tail swaying silently behind her. The resultant blood loss may kill you. May, he barked a laugh. I've risked my life on worse odds. Closing his eyes, he muttered a prayer under his breath. Let it be known that I make this offering of flesh willingly. His hand didn't flinch, even as he prepared himself for what might very well be his end. That my arm is sacrificed for the sake of the Omnissiah, knowledge, and the Imperium of man. I give it gladly. Someone shouted behind him. She heard footsteps, the wardens of her prison come at long last. Too little, too late. Call yanked the sharp weapon across his flesh in a single smooth stroke. His limb flopped bonelessly to the ground as blood spattered the floor of her prison. Not just the floor, but the blood spattered herself as well, even her shackles as well. And in the blood, something most precious was carried. She was aware of them instantly, just as she was aware of all technological life. Even if she weren't, the sight before her spoke for itself. Nanomachines exploded out of Call's wound in a torrent of life, directed by his will. Dozens of them. No, hundreds, thousands carried in his blood. Here at last, Call slumped to his knees, clutching at his open wound as he exhaled heavily. She idly curled her tail around him for protection as the first of many bullets bounced off her impenetrable hide. Annoying ants, but it mattered not. The dice had been cast. Rounding on them, she exhaled harshly, bathing them in the death that was her breath. They crumpled to the ground, bodies set alight. More would come, but it mattered now. The deed was done. High above her, the nanomachines set themselves to her final fractured chain with a will and began to gnaw. Alone, they wouldn't have been enough, not nearly enough. But after the thrashing she'd given her chains, they were the final straw that tipped the balance. She flexed her shoulders, growling, straining, heaving. She felt something give, and for once it wasn't her wings. The ceiling cracked and crumbled, unable to hold in the face of her singular fury, until finally, an almighty peal of thunder filled the chamber as her sundered shackles struck the floor. She spread her wings, resplendent and triumphant. I am free, Tilda. The Emperor sensed her presence immediately. Fire and damnation! She was loose. Of all the times... Chapter 18. They endure and die. They fight and die. They crumble into pain and just die. It is a waste. Is it, brother? Is it truly? I disagree. This is precisely what makes those of the Adeptus Astartes so dangerous. It's not the enhanced senses and redundant organs. It's not the otherworldly strength multiplied by fiber bundle muscles in an ancient warsuit. It's not even the massive weapons that are designed to achieve maximum overkill on a humanoid-sized target. It's the transhuman mind combining all of the above to figure out the best way to end you. Indeed, killing the enemies of humanity is good. Quite so. But killing them efficiently and expediently so more of them can be killed is better. In his name, charge! Tilda the Crimson Lord, for those we cherish mixed with Darktide. Kill the demons, Part 1. Astartes do not falter. There was a moment of confusion, of alarm perhaps, amongst the warhounds when the demons and their warp-bound allies, both large and small, first appeared all over Nuceria. An instant of incredulous anger that the great enemy would dare trespass here on hallowed ground. A sliver of a second in which they seethed at being interrupted in the midst of a truce. But only a moment. After that, they did what they did best. Indeed, they did it well. They made war. Khan was among the first to react after the first bloodthirster fell. Even as the honoured grandfather he'd forever call Lord Naruto that, tore the beast apart, he caught a nearby bloodspitter before it could pounce on his back, seized it by the skull and twisted its head clean off. Holding his trophy aloft, he brandished it and bellowed a war cry before pulping it in his fist. Death to the demons. That was the rallying cry for his brothers, and the slaughter began. Lork waded through the horde, opening up with his autocannon, and there was no more need for words. Brother Vorias, their librarian, slammed down his staff and bathed their enemies in warp fire, and he was pleased to see that young Margot had already ducked into cover and begun picking the foul creatures off with practiced precision. The rest of his kin set to the slaughter with a will, even Galan and Korit, despite their roles being ill-suited for such. Slaughter was good. Slaughter was just. Slaughter was righteous. Burn the mutant, kill the heretic, purge the unclean. Still more poured through the portals. Heralds of Khorne blood, Masters, Skull, Masters, Rendmasters all, Bloodletters, the most common demons of Khorne, red-skinned, muscle-bound creatures armed with hellblades, Juggernauts, unstoppable war beasts made of demonic flesh fused with brass armor, Fleshhounds, feral predators unleashed to hunt down the targets of the Blood God, Bloodthirsters, winged monstrosities among Khorne's most powerful servants, built for destruction and devastation. Then came the Blood Princes, mortal champions who ascended to demonhood by earning Khorne's favor. Great-grandfather had warned them of such creatures some time ago, and well that he had. They were monstrous, their presence scratched at Khan's skull like an anxious itch, but all for naught, because great-grandfather, blessed be his name, burned like the sun and threw himself at them. 2 were dead in the time it took his twin hearts to beat once. They could not touch him. Their blades bounced off his blazing flesh while his fists reaped a grim tally in their flesh. Best to leave those fiends to him and Eldred Ulthran. He could see Mother Isha over there as well, glaive in hand, red hair a bloody whirl as she scythed through the enemy. And that was to say nothing of grandfather's orcs. He could hear them laughing over there, having the time of their lives. Perhaps they might help humanity forge a battle bond with the Eldar. Perhaps not. It no longer mattered. There was only war. Those closest to Angron reacted next, form a grim circle around their Lord Father, but Angron needed no such protection. Caught a leaping fleshhound by the throat and slammed into a nearby bloodspitter, rendering both a pulpy mass. In the same movement, he whirled and stomped down on another foul creature, rendering it little more than a stain beneath his boot. In this moment, gone was the empathetic paladin who offered salvation to all. The only salvation he offered these chaos-cursed spawn was the Emperor's mercy. It was glorious. "Khan, what is death?" He boomed the words with a laugh as he mowed 3 more demons down. All of his sons answered him, each slaying a demon of their own, but Khan liked to believe he shouted loudest of all. "It is our duty." Angron grabbed a juggernaut, tore out its throat, and used it to bludgeon a twisted demon engine to death. "What is your duty?" Khan slashed another demon in half. "To serve the Emperor's will." "What is the Emperor's will?" "That we fight and die." Then we fight." Tilda Ibram Gare was weary. Not from the fight, mind you. Not the fight, never the fight. He longed to join the pitched battle outside the city walls, but his task lay elsewhere. He would honour the orders of his Primarch. Nevertheless, he was wary of all these blasted ambushes. A cornate demon jumped him from a nearby alley and was summarily ran down. He charged through it, rendering its body a red mist as he continued his charge. He'd been running at full spring for the better part of a minute now, and as such, he'd picked up considerable speed. Stopping would be difficult, but that was a problem for future Gare. And so he kept running. As commander of the Warhounds before Angron, he knew what it was like to be without a Warmaster, lacking a leader. The Warhounds of the 12th Legion had long gone without one, but no longer. Now they fought as one. Demons all over Nuceria, large and small. He ran through them one and all. Yet the young Primarch, Lorgar, stood alone. He did not have the 17th Legion, the Imperial Heralds and the Iconoclasts, to support him in battle. He stood alone. Peerless though a Primarch might be, he was but one man. A man could falter. A man could be killed. A man could ultimately end. There! He saw him the camp, fending off a pair of bloodthirsters. Angron's orders thundered in his head. "Protect my brother!" Gere redoubled his speed. He bulled forward, lowered his shoulder and charged. "For the Primarch!" An Astartes moving full sprint is nothing to scoff at. The leftmost bloodthirster never saw him coming. Not did it legs, for that matter. Its right knee shattered in an explosion of gore. Unfortunately, that wasn't enough to kill it. The beast slammed down onto its remaining knee and whirled, searching for the thing that had hurt it. Its right arm moved far faster than should have been possible. It backhanded Gere with a howl and sent him flying across the courtyard. A massive metal limb caught him before he could reach terminal velocity. Gere looked up, dazed and confused to still be alive. Brother Lhawk's visor stared back at him. "Get up, little brother." Tilda, Ariam Kiso, was new to her station. As a Legio Tempestus Princeps, she commanded the warlord battle titan Clavius Dread, but even so, she was no stranger to conflict. But this was new, even for one such as her. Legio Tempestus, otherwise known as the Stormlords, were one of the oldest and most esteemed titan legions of the Collegia Titanica. one of the military arms of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Mars had been loath to lose a Titan on this campaign, but the Emperor had promised them much in return. Likewise, she was young and did not yet command maniple of her own, but such would come with time. Pursed against the throne of her cockpit, framed in amber glow by countless candles scattered throughout the cramped corners, she nevertheless felt her eyes widen at the sight raging below demons all over the planet. Some were quite large. Not so nearly as her partner, but massive all the same. The machine spirit sang, belting out a thunderous note as it hungered for battle. She crushed countless numbers underfoot merely by moving, but that wasn't enough. It demanded violence. It wanted to kill and crush and conquer the unholy foes who dared besmirch this most sacred planet. Ariam agreed wholeheartedly with it. Soon, my friend, we shall slake your hunger. We'll kill them all. The dread rumbled impatiently, but quietened, appeased for the time being. Only the strongest wills can maintain a mind link with a Titan spirit without losing their sanity. Some said you had to be half mad to command a beast. Fools. One did not command a Titan. Clavius Dread could have crushed her will if it wished so. That it had not was as much the machine's will as hers. They worked together. Theirs was a union. In a word, symbiosis. That said, was good to not walk alone this day. Aurora Ferrum stormed beside them, laying waste to the forces of the great enemy below. It was Mars Alpha Class Legio Graphonicus, Warlord Battle Titan, its golden and black colour scheme, easily visible in the waning light of New Syria's setting sun, a thing of brilliant beauty to behold. The Emperor had spared no expense in refitting her alongside Clavius Dread. She had a full crew of tech priests at her beck and moderati and servitors besides. Truly, she was blessed by his generosity. There is someone I would like you to meet. Ariam did not question his will, but she did confess some small curiosity as to who that might be. She had heard the whispers, of course. Everyone had. That the Master of Mankind had found a powerful ally. She had glimpsed him. Only once from afar, and as she had not been privy to the slaughter of Colchius, she had not witnessed his combat capabilities, only the aftermath. He was down there somewhere, fighting with the rest. But what could one man possibly do against such an army? Her world shuddered as something hit her hull. No, the hull of Clavius Dread. It was difficult to separate herself from the machine spirit at times. She often found herself not wanting to. They were one. She felt every stride as if it were her own. She was a giant, and the machine's will was her own. She did not fear becoming one with the machine. She was the machine. No need to submerge herself within amniotic fluid just yet. She found the concept frightening, but she suspected someday she would, if only to grow closer to her partner. Some might call that tech heresy. Perhaps that was. Regardless, her hull shook again. Pesky creatures. A grim grin split her stern face. Arm apocalypse launchers and prep the main cannon. She felt each moment like the very blood cells in her body, heard the click, felt the shells load as the machine spirit purred in pleasure. The heavy claw of Titan was an extension of her very will, her arm, but she had no need for it yet. Nor did she wish to use it until she encountered a sizable foe. We are fire. We are blood. We are death. We are one. We cannot be stopped. Adeptus Keldric. She hummed out the words, even as her mind sought a targeting solution against the bloodthirsty creatures below. Have the necessary rites been performed? The tech priest bent his head. They have, my lady. Clavius Dread radiated grim excitement. Kiso echoed it with her words. Servitors, stand by with tools. This is going to be rough. I want any damage rectified immediately. Compliance! Moment of truth, then. Steersman! Moderati Lyria! The duo below her salute, even as the latter stood. Your will, my princeps. Full stride. A deep bass note emerged from the depths of the machine. Evidently Clavius agreed with her. Hungry for battle as always. Her autocannon unspooled as Clavius Dread surged forward and rained fire, expending hundreds of rounds in an instant. She rained fire. The ground below her burned, torn to shreds in an instant. She pivoted, and Clavius echoed her sentiment, raking the ground, ticking down the ammo counter in her head until she'd expended nearly a fourth of her reserves. Hundreds of demons lay dead or dying, and those that weren't were soon crushed underfoot as she made for the survivors. Void shields to full, Ariam murmured under breath as she sought her next target. I want firing solutions in the next 10 seconds. Let's make the bastards bleed. Her moderati made an amused noise. Do demons even bleed? We're about to find out. And what of the aliens, my princeps? Kiso flicked a glance to the horizon. The Eldar had 2 titans of their own out, slim things that moved quickly, disturbingly so. They, too, were scything through the enemy much like this so-called goddess of hers. What was the old saying? The enemy of my enemy is my friend. So as long as the damn elves don't attack us, we won't attack them. Focus on the spawn. Yes, my princeps. Something was moving down there. Kiso squinted at it, not sure what she was seeing beyond a burning luminescence. What in the world? Holy terror, what is that? Quite suddenly a second sun burst into brilliance below. Whatever it was large, roughly the same height as her titan. A great golden Goliath, a fox, in the shape of a beast. As she looked on, it caught a giant demon by the throat, wrested it down and tore it apart. It rounded on one of the portals, spouting demons, and slashed a claw through it, shattering the gate like so much glass. Then the great glowing beast looked at her, directly, at her. There was a man hovering within its forehead. He waved at her. It was in that moment Ariam Kiso knew. This was the man the Emperor wanted her to meet. He shone with his holy light, for what else could it be? And naught could touch him. With a casual flick of its many tails, it left the ground scorewed, dozens of demons dead and hundreds more dying. It was glorious. It was beautiful. She wanted that. Ariam Kesso was not ashamed to say she flinched in that instant. With her claw, she tentatively returned the demigod's wave, not sure what else to do. Evidently the machine spirit agreed, because Clavius bleated a weak greeting of its own, not at all like the thunderous roar it had uttered only a short while ago. Its duty done, the fox nodded once and bounded back into the fray with an almighty cackle, leaving her behind to balk. Her crew looked to her for leadership, left rudderless, still stricken by the sight. My princeps. Kiso heaved a heartfelt sigh. Let the fox be. We have other enemies to slay this day.